Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our special council meeting of Monday, July 25th, 2022. I'll call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Before we start, I wanted to share that the town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Item 1.1 on this afternoon's agenda, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? Seeing none, I'll move on to acceptance of the agenda. Item 2.1. I have one addition, item 13.1, the CAO report. Are there any other additions to the agenda? Kaylin.
Item 13.2, land matter.
Thank you. Are there any other additions? See none, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillor Beekman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 4.1, 3.0, adoption of the previous minutes that were circulated in your agenda package. Were there any errors or omissions? Councillor Chapman, put your mic on, please.
Those minutes in my agenda package, so were they circulated before? Did I miss those?
We didn't include them in this one. That'll come up at our next regular council meeting.
So that'll be tabled, or
that's
then?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Good catch. Item 4.1, business arising from the minutes. We have our CFO Kyle Beauchamp and our Deputy CAO presenting regarding council remuneration review. Kyle, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks and good evening, everybody. So we do have for council's review the council compensation kind of package review. So at the last council meeting on July 11th, we had Hillcrest Financial present to council the findings from their compensation survey, at which time council elected that administration come back with a few options for the report. So in your staff report, there's a few items for consideration. We have council's compensation, per diems, technology reimbursement, the frequency of council compensation reviews, travel expenses, and any other items that might have been missed that council may want to bring up. So kind of quickly summarize these. So council compensation is highlighted in the survey. Council was on the bottom level of annual compensation when compared to the 10 other municipalities who participated in the report. So as far as if council wishes to make an adjustment here, a percentile should be considered as where council wants to land on this. Options include 25th, 35th, 50th, 75th, and 100th percentile, as demonstrated in the report. It should be noted that the 50th percentile is that middle ground of this survey. On the council per diems, overall council's level of per diems for the full day and annual day was slightly below the 50th percentile, but fairly comparable. There has been some uncertainty before as to when per diem should be claimed for special meetings, events, etc. Council should possibly consider adjustments to this policy. Could either leave it the way it is, eliminate per diems in full, which could be offset through an increase in council's monthly compensation, eliminate half-day per diems, and keep full-day per diems as is, or some other method at council's discretion. Technology reimbursement. Currently, council does receive a $100 monthly amount for the reimbursement of personal items related to technology. Kind of the question here is if council wishes to make any changes or leave as is. Again, the survey kind of highlights what other municipalities are doing in this regards. In regards to council compensation survey, it's been at least 10 years since this type of exercise has been performed for the town of Coaldale. To maybe make this more formalized and expected, it's recommended that council add to the policy some type of frequency for which this type of exercise can take place into the future. In regards to travel expenses, currently all travel expenses paid for the town of Coaldale pay the government of Alberta rate, which is currently 50.5 cents per kilometer. Other municipalities are using this rate or the Canada Revenue Agency rate. It seems to be the more popular one, as that one is updated more regularly for changes to cost of living and etc. Currently, that rate is at 61 cents per kilometer. We're also, as a min, looking for possible adjustments to the meal expense claims here. For council, we don't have details right now on a recommendation for that. However, it's something that, as a min, we like to bring back at a future date when this policy is formalized. And the 6th point here, if there's anything else that we missed in this report that council would like to discuss, be happy to bring that up as well. So we do have a few options for council to kind of consider, decide on the direction that they would wish administration to proceed. Once council does establish a direction to proceed, admin will have to bring back the council remuneration policy to council at a further date with these adjustments, at which then the adjustments can take place. So with that being said, I'll just kind of open the floor to council for any questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Just before I open it up to members of council, can you just go over one more time for our listeners at home about how Hillcrest came up with the percentiles? So when you say that 50 percentile is the middle of the pack bracket, can you just explain that a little bit better? Because some may understand that as trying to give a 50% increase.
Sure. So when reviewing the data, it should be noted that there's a difference between an average and a percentile. So an average is taking if you have 10 numbers, you add all 10 numbers up together, and you divide that by 10, and that gets you your average. That can often be skewed if there's very low points or high points in a survey like this. So what Hillcrest did for this is they used the percentile factor. And so the 50th percentile essentially means that if the town of Coaldale is in the middle, there's 5 municipalities who would be below you on compensation and 5 municipalities who would be ahead of you on compensation. So you're right in the middle between the other municipalities who have been compared to. That doesn't mean a 50% raise. That means that there's 50% below you and 50% higher than you. Just to kind of compare that, if council was to look at the 75th percentile, that would entail that 75% of the participants would be below town of Coaldale, and 25% of the participants would be above the town of Coaldale. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. And then what I think would work best is for us to discuss each one of these points individually. And then we'll open up questions for our CFO regarding council remuneration-based pay. So that's number 1. So the options for that council select the 25th, 35th, 50th, or 75th percentile of the 10 municipal comparators outlined in the consultant's report to establish council's base rate of pay. So I'll open that up to any questions, comments to members of council. Councillor Avery.
So just for a little bit more clarity again on the, not on the percentile, but 2019, I believe it was, is when council actually lost 30% in their remuneration. Is that correct?
So prior to January 1, 2019, all elected officials in Canada, 1/3 of their salary was tax-free. Following that 2019 date, that allowance was effectively removed by the federal government, which meant that salaries for council, for all elected officials were now 100% taxable rather than 2/3 taxable, essentially reducing the net pay that every elected official took home. At that time, we did bring this back to council, as essentially every other municipality in Canada did, and said, hey, your compensation is being reduced as a result of this policy. Would you like to increase your gross amount to make up for the difference, or to leave as is? Some municipalities decided to increase their gross amount so that their net pay did not change. Town of Coaldale, on the other hand, did not make any adjustments, so their net pay did decrease as a result of that elimination from that policy from the CRA.
Anybody else have a question or comment? Councillor Chapman?
Aaron, I just need to go to this page that you showed, just to follow up on Councillor Avery's comments, and that is that way down the list here.
What's
I
your
don't
question going to be out of that?
Well, the point I wanted to make is that the difference would be on that income, on the income tax portion would be 32% for councillors and 23% for mayor. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And page 24 of 149. 24.
So this is a summary of, the mayor's current salary and town council's current salary. And what we've done is we've compared these to each of the percentiles as identified in the report. And what we've done here is shown what the variance is in a dollar percentile is, and what the variance is in a variance in the dollar amount and a variance in a percentile amount compared to that percentile. So for example, if you're looking at the mayor compared to the 25th percentile, just for easy numbers, the mayor is 10% below the 25th percentile versus town council is 4% below the 25th percentile. Looking at the 50th percentile, again, going across here, you'll see that the mayor is currently 34% under that amount, and town council is 24% under that amount. So that's just kind of to put the exact dollars and changes that would apply to each level here into context.
Just to follow up to that, Kyle, then the tax impact at the 50th percentile, could you describe the difference at 13% and councillor difference at 32%? So are we, if we were to take a 50% increase, 50%, enter the 50th percentile bracket, our tax impact would be 32% above what we were we would have been making prior, say in 2022.
So this is the third and the kind of the bottom chart that you're referring to. So if we're looking at the 50th percentile, the total additional funds required would be $40,080, and netting that between council and mayor, that's a 26% increase to get to that 50th percentile. What we've done is that tax impact, that $9 million and change that you see there, that is the total municipal taxes that we collected or levied this past year for the municipal portion only. So a $40,000 increase compared to taxes levied last year is about a 0.44% increase or impact on taxes that would essentially be required to fund that added expense.
So that's the municipal tax impact.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? So one more time, our options for council remuneration is to leave it as is or move it up to the 25th, 35th, 50th, or 75th percentile of the 10 municipal comparators outlined in the consultant's report to establish council's base rate of pay. Someone care to make a motion on one of those options? Councillor Chapman.
Want to break down each and every one of the points
Yes.
As separate motions?
Yes. Councillor Saylor.
I'd like to make a motion that we would move to the 75th percentile. Seeing as that we lost that third, if we bump it up to the 50th, we're basically only putting ourselves back to where we should be. If we go with the 75th, then we're actually receiving a raise and we don't need to do this again and again. We can do it once and do it right and be done with it. So my recommendation would be the 75th.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments on Councillor Saylor's motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Keep your hands up. We have 3 in favor. Opposed? Opposed is Councillor Beekman, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Reese, and Mayor Van Rijn. So the motion is defeated. I'll open it up to the floor one more time. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. Maybe just a caveat to my my voting is that I'm not one to vote for raises for myself, so I would probably be declining any to vote in favor.
You cannot abstain from the vote, though. Okay, one more time, I'll open it up to the floor. Does someone care to make a motion to leave it as is or move up to the 25th, 35th, 50th percentile of the 10 municipal comparators? Councillor Reese.
Mayor Van Rijn, I'd like to make a motion that we go to the 50th percentile.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Councillor Reese to move up to the 50th percentile. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of moving up to the 50th percentile? Opposed? Councillor Avery, Councillor Pickering, and Councillor Chapman. I'm missing somebody. And Councillor Saylor. Motion is defeated. I'll open it up to the floor again. Councillor Saylor.
I have a question. Is there a way that we could split the difference and say like the 65th and make up a new number?
You can do anything you like.
I'll make a recommendation that we go with the 65th percentile and split the difference.
There is a motion on the floor by Councillor Saylor that council select the 65th percentile of the 10 municipal comparators outlined in the consultant's report to establish council's base rate of pay. I just have a question for our CFO. Do you have any comments on that?
The only thing is we can get the 65th percentile, so I don't know the exact number. You can't just go easy math and just go between the two. So should council decide to proceed, no problems, but I don't have a firm rate. I can tell you what it is right now.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Councillor Saylor to move up to the 65th percentile. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Were you opposed? Okay, so Councillor Chapman, Councillor Beekman, Mayor Van Rijn opposed. The motion is carried. Okay, moving on to number 2, council per diems. Is there any questions for our CFO regarding the half-day and full-day per diems? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So upon reviewing this whole report, I mean, I was just thinking, so if we got rid of the half-day per diems, that would give us, what, like $7,400, I believe, right? Or something like that. But if you go on and read the technology reimbursement, that's $8,400 a year. Personally, for me, like, I would be okay with losing the technology reimbursement. I don't know how the rest of council feels, but that's $8,400 towards our base pay, rather than, I don't think we should take away per diems at all, full or half-day, because we do a lot of half-day events in which our per diems are useful. We also do a lot of full-day events in which the per diems clearly are useful. So I was just thinking, what if we just switched the two? So got rid of the technology, that would give us an extra $1,400 as opposed to the per diems, which is somewhere on there, $7,400 or something like that. But we went with the technology, that's $8,400. It'd give us $1,400 more towards the base pay.
You definitely have that ability. Just a couple of notes on that is, excuse me, per diems are fully taxable, right, to you. The technology reimbursement, just a note, is since it is considered a reimbursement of an expense, it's not taxable. So just a caveat there, but it's council's wish. If you want to remove the technology and keep per diems the same, happy to accommodate that in the policy.
Thank you for that. As far as the taxable part of that, like the $100 per month, I mean, I'm okay with that. I don't know how everyone else feels, but
The per diems are taxable, the technology.
oh, sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah,
Okay.
the technology not being taxable. I mean, I really could care less if we lost the technology reimbursement. I don't see a point, really.
Okay. Any more questions, comments regarding the per diems? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. And just through to the rest of council, just maybe a bit of a history on the last council. The last council did not claim any per diems, half-day or full days, did not claim any mileages for the full duration of 4 years, just as, I think it was just more out of principle for ourselves. I mean, that's an independent decision or choice matter. And personally for myself, I don't mind the half-day or the full-day per diem. I think that that's there for a reason, being that particularly for conferences and such, that where there is time away from home and time away from your other employment. I think that that's important to keep. So that, and of course then the mileage, we'll be talking about that a little later on. I think that the mileage will be
We're just talking about per diems right now.
But we're talking for that. I would keep those per diems plus the technology, the amount for our internet or cell phones, and that being that is normal council business.
Okay, so once again, we're going to go through line item by line item. So we'll be talking about technology next. So back to the per diems. We'll go ahead.
Just to add one thing, regardless of what council decides to do on the per diems, I would just recommend just to make sure that there is some perhaps added clarity as to the policy is a little ambiguous as to when a per diem can be claimed. For example, are per diems claimable for all events in Coaldale, all events outside of Coaldale, which type of special meeting? So there's just some uncertainty there that there has been seen in the past. And we just want to make sure as administration that we're just treating each one fairly in the same standpoint. So just additional clarity would be appreciated in that aspect. Just one note on that.
Thank you. Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. There's also per diems for certain boards and committees that council sits on. And right now, council is not allowed to claim and keep those. They're supposed to be turned back into the town. So I know some are not taking it at all. So if they go and there is some type of remuneration for being on that board, they just turn it back to the board, which I don't think is, again, fair to the town. Because if we're there representing and they're paying every other municipality X number of $200 to be there, we either have to look at our bylaw for that and let that council member keep it, and or make sure that they are getting that and bringing it back to the town, because that's also thousands of dollars that we're giving up to these other committees and boards that we're not bringing back into the town.
Correct, yeah, there's, I believe the one instance that crossed my mind is the Barons Eureka. They do send their per diem directly to the town of Coaldale for that.
So I just want to get clarification on that then. So like FCSS, where our council member goes to that, the town is not getting that per diem for that member attending meetings?
The town of Coaldale does receive that. So Barons Eureka will actually give the town of Coaldale a check, and that goes into the town of Coaldale's revenue. That doesn't go to the counselor who sits on that committee.
No, that's correct. So when I was saying FCSS, you were talking about Barons Eureka.
Yes.
And then is there any other committees that any members of council sit on that the town is currently not getting a per diem that they issue to other members like Councilor Avery brought up?
Um,
And you don't have to.
off the top of my head,
yeah.
I can't think of any at the moment.
Okay, so maybe that, I agree with Councillor Avery that if there's per diems being paid to other members from other municipalities for those boards, then if the town of Coaldale representative is at that meeting, that per diem should be going to the town of Coaldale, not to the individual council member.
So that would be keeping status quo on that then?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And then in answer to your question regarding when a per diem is issued, that is for half-day or full-day meetings. Currently, I don't understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if there's functions going on, let's say if a member of council attends all day on August the 6th for the Summer Fest, were you saying that there's a per diem that is normally sent out for that?
No, not for that.
Okay.
There's just been some questions in the past, and we just want to make sure that we're just all clear on the same page for that.
Yes. So, and I'll
there's-
open it up to council to comment, but my understanding is that per diem is only for half-day or full-day meetings. No functions.
Yeah, so on that aspect, would council agree then if a per diem would be claimable if it's a meeting that's available to all members of council equal, or like if you're having meetings, is it meetings that all of council would participate in, or meetings that select few would participate in? I guess I don't have a good example of that, but
So in when we started up our term, we had all the orientation meetings. Those ones qualify for the per diem. When we're going to meetings on our committees or boards, no, those do not qualify.
perfect, thank you.
Any questions, comments on that?
And you stand correct on that too, Mayor, because FCSS, we're using that as an example. I think there's a couple of other ones that commissions or boards that do pay a stipend, I guess, to their board members. I can't, for example, Community Futures, and then there's a couple of other ones that used to pay. Deputy Mayor Pickering and I both sit on the Water Commission, so that paid as well. So because that's a direct appointment to those boards or committees for a regular standing appointment, then I support the position of not claiming those.
Okay,
as
so just to be clear then, I'm going to ask our municipal clerk to reach out to all the committees and boards that members of council are currently sitting on to see if there's any per diems being paid out. And if they are, they should be going to the town of Coaldale. And then because you're mentioning some that I don't even know that they do that, so. Okay, so back to item number 2, council per diems. Any other questions or comments for our CFO? So our options are that council eliminate per diems altogether, that council eliminate half-day per diems but keep the full-day per diems, or that council keep the current practice of half and full-day per diems. Does someone care to make a motion for one of those? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'd like to make a motion that council keep the current practice of half and full day per diems.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Beekman and Councillor Avery. The motion is carried. Moving on to technology reimbursement. So that's the $100 a month that council gets for use of their personal cell phone and internet service at home. So the options for that one is that council keep the current monthly technology reimbursement amount of $100 in place, that council eliminate the current monthly technology reimbursement of $100, or that council change the current monthly technology reimbursement amount of $100 to whatever council decides. Any questions or comments on that? I'll ask that someone make a motion for one of those 3 options, please. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that council keep the current monthly technology reimbursement amount of $100 in place.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing now, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Avery, Councillor Reese, motion is passed. Moving on to compensation survey frequency. Now, I'm just going to have our CFO just explain for our listeners at home and members of council again to speak on that one, please.
The frequency of a compensation survey sets precedent for when this type of exercise should take place. Again, it's been at least 10 years since Town of Coaldale Council has participated in this. And as you can see from the results of the survey, the lack of frequency can sometimes put council's compensation way out of whack compared to others. In this instance, it kind of resulted in, without it being reviewed on a regular basis, that Town of Coaldale's compensation was far below our comparative. So putting this in place where we know it's going to occur perhaps once every council term, there is some certainty and known about it that we can ensure that the results and our comparisons to other municipalities stay in line on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is that we do this in the June of election year. So that would be every 4 years then is one of the options, unless somebody else has another suggestion. So I'll open that up to questions or comments. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if June's a good time to be reviewing that, just because every council team is different, and like while we put in a lot of time, there might be other councils that may not be as active or involved as this current council is. So I just wonder if the date should be adjusted maybe to something further down the road, maybe after the new term comes, something similar to how we got ours rolling when we got elected in.
Okay, thank you. Kaylin, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I can provide a little bit of context for that. The rationale with looking at council compensation in the last year of the term, it's the previous council making a compensation decision for the incoming council. That way it avoids the situation where you have to do it yourself. So although unfortunately the ball has to get started somehow, and that's where we are today, the idea is for the previous council to make a decision 6 months prior to it coming into effect that January with the next council. Using the survey data based on 10 comparators in the province. Like, that's the logic. You can set it up however you wish, and each council can go through this as sort of one of the first items in their new term, but typically councils will make a decision in a term when it's not actually going to affect them, but the next group.
So then, for the sake of argument for tonight, are we able to just make a decision that we're going to do it every 4 years of the, so in the election year? As far as the percentile, is that something we can discuss?
So the percentile will be in the policy. Then when the compensation review happens, we'll bring back the policy with it. At that time, council can make any changes or amendments to the policy, including the percentile at that time, should they wish.
So then, in other words, if we tonight say that the 65th percentile then will always be based on all the other municipalities, that'll pinpoint where we're going to be.
Yeah, so setting the 65th percentile will kind of set the base standard as far as precedent. But again, that's in the policy and that'll be set. But again, policies can always be amended or changed as you wish, so.
Okay, and then further to Councillor Saylor's comment that we were playing catch up, that's why he wanted to go to 75th, and then we compromised at 65th for this next motion. If we're back to where we're supposed to be, then we can pick 50th or whatever number we want then, correct?
Correct, yeah, you have the ability to change the percentile at, based on the available data as you desire.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Kyle. Hypothetically, though, if let's say we set the percentile in this in the wording here at 50th, and none of the other participating municipalities take part, essentially after 4 years we could be decreasing pay of the next council. Correct? Because if we're sitting in 65th percentile now and we go and take it back to the 50th and nobody's increased their pay, then wouldn't we be taking from them?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you were at the 65th and you went back to 50 and nobody else increased theirs in 3 years, like, and the data was still the same, yeah, it would be a rollback. It's unlikely that the data will be the same, as, you know, different municipalities have cost of living adjustments and increases and whatnot that usually change the data from year to year. So there is that risk yet, but it's unlikely that the data will be exactly the same in 4 years from now. If that helps answer your question, I'm not sure.
And then like you mentioned too, Kyle, it'll come back, the policy, so that can be changed when the decision needs to be made.
Yep, exactly. So when the survey is done, the only way for council to make any amendments is to change the policy. So the two are tied hand in hand.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Can I get someone to entertain making a motion to pick a timeline and the percentile? Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Motion that we do it on the 4th year and that we set it at, I think we should set it at 65 and then we can adjust it at the time.
That's correct. Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Would it be possible to make an amendment to that motion to have that compensation reviewed by an independent party, such as the one that we used this time around? I think that's the fairest and the most distance from the elected officials.
I don't know that we need to do that to make an amendment to the motion. We can just cover this off, and then when it comes back in the election year, then we can decide if we want to go that route. Because there's expense, there's like a $10,000 price tag for getting that done.
Moving forward.
And again, that's something we can discuss at that time then. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor by Deputy Mayor Pickering. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Chapman opposed. Thank you. Moving on to travel expenses, that council be reimbursed for mileage according to the mileage rate established by the Canada Revenue Agency, or that council maintain the current mileage reimbursement rate as established by the government of Alberta, or we can establish our own rate if we so desire. So the Canada Revenue Agency rate is 61 cents and the provincial one is 51, correct?
50 and a half.
50.5. So
For
just
context, the provincial rate hasn't changed in at least 5 years, while the CRA rate is reviewed and generally updated annually.
Okay, thank you. So the two options, or three options again, Canada Revenue Agency, that's the 61, or the Alberta government one, that's 50.5, or we can establish our own rate. Are there any questions or comments for our CFO on that one? Seeing none, can I get someone to entertain a motion, please? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion that that administration and council being reimbursed for mileage according to the mileage rate established by the CRA, which is 61 cents.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. So you changed it from council to put administration as well, correct? Okay.
So that, just for clarity's sake, that will be the going rate for all of the town of Coaldale for any administration that's being charged.
Thank you. And Kyle, a question for you then. So you brought up the meals. You want a separate motion for that then, or do you want to do a friendly amendment for the motion that Councillor Chapman has?
For the meals, there's very, like, as you can see on the, like, if you look at page 23 in your agenda package, you'll see that the meal expense does vary significantly from municipality to municipality. So town of Coaldale is currently at $43 a day. Some are at the Alberta rates, which is $40 a day, while Lacomb's at 57, then Tabor at 67, Innisville at 60. Blackfalds is at the CRA rate, but to be frank, the CRA rate for meals is about $95 a day, which is substantially higher than all the others. So as administrations, we didn't put a recommendation here as far as the meal for this meeting. The intention was that when we bring back the policy, we'd have a couple more suggestions for council, just to slip in a number there for the policy. But if it's something that council would like to discuss right now, I'd be more than happy to entertain those conversations.
No, we'll hold off then until you bring that policy back. So there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Chapman to change the kilometer rate to the Canada Revenue Agency of 0.61 cents per kilometer. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. What would council's thoughts be if we were to implement that rate immediately? Would there be any issues with that, or do we have to wait till the budget season or 2023?
Formally, you have to wait until council approves the travel expense policy. So until we bring back the council compensation and the travel expense policy at another council meeting, those changes won't be effective until those policies are formally approved by town council. So unfortunately, it can't be effective today, just the way, because we're not changing the policy today.
Okay, thank you. Last chance, questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question on Councillor Chapman's motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, moving on, we're going to jump ahead to item 8.1, the West Industrial Area Structure Plan, Area Outline Plan for 845 developments, and we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Van Rijn. Lana, this is for a different matter. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this evening, I have the opportunity to provide you with which is the outline plan for the West Coaldale Industrial Area. And for reference or for clarity's sake, an outline plan is really the next stage as we look at in terms of the development process for something like developing an industrial park or at times a new neighborhood where it's a larger plan to begin with. And this is something that takes place after an area structure plan. And it is a non-statutory document, which is to say the statutory document like an area structure plan is something that's outlined specifically in the Municipal Government Act. It's passed by bylaw. It requires 3 readings. Plan like this is done by a simple resolution of council. Generally speaking, this is a more technical document. It provides administration with some guidance as we work through the process with the developer, and it informs some of the further stages of planning, such as subdivision, which is something that goes before the Municipal Planning Commission, of which some members of council will be members as well as members of the general public when it comes time to consider a subdivision application that moves forward. So it provides a level of detail a little bit greater than what we in the area structure plan, but generally it's a document that is really more of a guide administratively is the way we would look at it. So rather than provide a run through of the plan, we have the developers consultants from ISL Engineering. So we have Brian Conger and Sue Paton, there it is. I keep forgetting which one's which, here to provide you with a presentation that will take you through the outline plan in some detail, and following that we'll come back and make some recommendations, and council have an opportunity to ask some questions. So with that, I'll invite our friends from ISL Engineering to speak on behalf of the plan.
Thank you. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn and Council, for having us this evening. Here to speak to the Developments Limited Outline Plan. We're going to walk through today what is an outline plan within the town of Coaldale. And as Cam mentioned, the parameters for outline plans. We'll use that one instead. Okay. The parameters for outline plans change between municipalities, unlike statutory plans, which are in Alberta governed by the Municipal Government Act. We'll then speak to the alignment between the outline plan and the West Industrial Area Structure Plan, as well as provide an overview of the outline plan and my vision. Sorry, I'm going to move over here, as well as speak a little bit to the outline plan details. So what is an outline plan? Outline plans, they're not legislated under the Municipal Government Act, but they do provide important decision-making tools which are approved by resolution of council, and that's why we're here before you today. They are smaller in scale than area structure plans, but they provide greater detail than an ASP and can be completed in either a single phase or several small phases of development. The requirements set forth for an outline plan in Coaldale, these come out of the town plan. And the requirements are as follows, that there are studies that ensure the land is suitable for the intended use with respect to soil servicing, drainage, and transportation. We can speak to those studies in a moment. That there's compliance with the town plan and the relevant area structure plan, which we were here 2 months ago, I believe, to speak to at the public hearing. That there's opportunities and constraints of the land and the development concept, open needs, servicing, and transportation networks, and that the strategy for phasing and development. So that just speaks to the content that needs to be in an outline plan, and that there is some public consultation that occurs, and that the decision rests with you as council. A little bit about the outline plan. It's been developed to provide these additional details for development of a portion of the lands between 14th Avenue and Range Road 201A on the north, and all these lands are within the West Industrial ASP. So some supporting technical studies that have been prepared include the Historical Resources Act approval and the Outline Plan Servicing Strategy. As well, there were other studies that were previously prepared as part of the West Industrial ASP, including the biophysical impact assessment, wetland inventory assessment, and the Phase 1 environmental site assessment. There we go. The concept itself has been developed to align with Coaldale West Industrial ASP, as well as your requirements for an outline plan. And previously, the outline plan had been prepared in coordination with the area structure plan. And so extensive community consultation took place for both of these projects. And that included a virtual open house and online survey, a stakeholder input session, virtual engagement session, posting on Let's Connect Coaldale, as well as the public hearing that occurred for the area structure plan. A little bit with respect to the overview of the plan itself. The outline plan encompasses approximately 35.48 hectares, and these are predominantly agricultural at the moment. The parcel is relatively flat, and it generally drains towards the southeast part of the site. And the outline plan concept provides for the industrial and highway commercial development in alignment with the approved industrial and highway commercial 2 land use districts, which had previously been approved concurrently with the adoption of the West Industrial Area Structure Plan. When we look at the statistics for the site, we've got a gross developable area of 35.48 hectares. 21.93 of those hectares are going to be industrial, 4.3 hectares are going to be highway commercial, as well as there's 2.12 hectares for public open space and 2.12 hectares which are going to be stormwater management. And then last but not least are the roadways, which are sitting at 5.01 hectares. On the left-hand side there, we've got the photo of the site, with the concept plan site shown over top of it. And then to the right of it is the land use. So you see the highway commercial, the C2 along the west side, and then the industrial further on in. And then to the north and south of it, also within the area structure plan boundaries, but not within this outline plan, those lands are urban reserve to the north, and there is a little bit of I2 light industrial to the southwest, as well as some urban reserve. So that's still within the area structure plan, but outside of our outline plan today. One of the studies that I forgot to mention on the previous slide, but has been conducted as well, was a traffic impact assessment. So the TIA determined that all intersections generally operate well within the existing configurations with respect to stage 1. And so from a short-term or 2024 horizon, access to the development is proposed off of 12th Avenue East. And then long-term, the 10-year horizon, 12th Avenue will be extended west towards Highway 845, and access to the development will be from both future intersections of 12th Avenue East and the future 845 12th Avenue intersection. With respect to the road classifications, local roadways will be developed to the town's industrial road standards and will connect to the adjacent road network. And the 12th Avenue right-of-way has been identified as a collector standard within your current transportation master plan. With respect to fire and EMS, anticipated response times are 7 to 9 minutes, which is within typical recommended timeframes. And mail delivery will be provided per standard Canada Post protocol at the time of the development. So with respect to utility servicing, outline plan servicing strategy was prepared by Talbera International Technologies Limited in alignment with town requirements and the policies of the West Industrial ASP. For water distribution systems will be designed in accordance with the City of Lethbridge 2021 design standards, as well as the Town of Coaldale Infrastructure Master Plan. This system will be achieved through a tie-in to the existing town distribution system at 12th Avenue and 13th Street right-of-way, as well as the 14th Avenue right-of-way. With respect to sanitary servicing, the design of the trunk line will be determined with the Phase 1 detailed design of the development, and trunk line discharges to a lift station near the intersection of 13th Street and 14th Avenue. For stormwater servicing, stormwater management system will be a dual drainage system. The intent is to grade the site so that all of the off-site stormwater remains outside of the development boundaries, and all on-site stormwater will be contained within the boundaries and conveyed to the storm pond, which is in the southeast corner of the outline plan. In terms of individual parcel servicing, a single and water and sanitary service and a single storm service will be installed to each lot during lot development. For 2 or more lots merged into a single lot, a single water and sanitary service and single storm service will be installed. The sizing of the water and sanitary service and storm service will be determined during the detailed lot design, and the development of roadways will be constructed to the City of Lethbridge's industrial pavement structure to the top of the asphalt base course, which includes the concrete low profile, rolled curb, and gutter. Did I get that great? Okay, thank you. Asphalt surface course on a section of roadway will be installed when all lots along the roadway are developed and services are installed. Lastly, with respect to shallow utilities for development will be extended from existing utilities within Coaldale in alignment with the phasing plan. Power requirements for industrial uses, they've yet to be determined, but electrical and other utilities are likely to be underground with an electrical transformer on each lot. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor for any questions, comments. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Maybe I'm just being nitpicky here, but going up in the package here for the first couple pictures of the outline plan, like using that overhead view, for instance.
Okay.
I want to go back to that one.
You help me there, Lana?
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so on that one, on the outline plan overview, we have the ASP boundary, but within that we have the outline plan boundary.
Correct.
And when you skip down to the utilities overviews, the outline plan boundary is the ASP boundary. Now, maybe I just don't know enough about the industry to understand why the outline plan boundary is different from one to the next. If you could explain that, thank you.
Sure. When it comes to the servicing, Albert, can you help us with that one? So if you can, you're meaning this, the phasing at the end, or just in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in those ones, the dotted red that goes around what would be the ASP boundary in these the first couple pictures, outline plan boundary there, and I was
Sure.
under the impression that the two were separate. So,
Sure.
Speak, I need you to come up to the mic, please.
I'm Albert TAGO with Alberta. So when we are doing the site servicing for the outline plan, we want to include the areas that would be impacted in that in the future. Right, so that is why you see that the servicing area being extended past the outline plan into the area plan, because those are areas that in the future will be in there. So we have a bigger outline plan coverage, but within that, bigger area structure plan coverage, but within that we have the outline plan that looks at, still looking at the whole area for servicing, because in the future they're going to be using the same. They will flow through infrastructure for connectivity. We can't leave that out since it's in that same outline plan. I don't know if I'm making sense. Especially if you look at the north, for instance, we are making sure that once we move into that area, moves into the outline plan stage, it will be able to connect through down into the. If you take the storm or the water, the connectivity is there within the current outline plan to handle that future section that is taken out. It's a little bit, is
Yeah.
that clear?
I guess then, so essentially what's left out of the initial outline plan is whatever's in phase 4, correct? Have you scrolled down a little bit more to the bottom of the utilities, they have utility phases, so,
Correct.
okay.
That's in phase 4, but we've planned for it as far as infrastructure goes now, because it was in the outline plan, it was in the area structure.
Thank you, Albert, Councillor Beekman. Any other question, comments? Okay, well, thank you for your presentation, and then we'll ask Cameron to come back up.
Thank you for having us.
The entire industrial development process we've identified as being strategically important for the town of Coaldale. And it's a process which we've undertaken, which we've provided a certain amount of flexibility to our procedural process in order to ideally get this land online sooner rather than later, given the lack of available industrial capacity in the town. And so we've seen that through the area structure plan process into now, and so far it's worked very well. One thing that I do want to point out with respect to this is there is a note that there is a requirement in the intermunicipal development plan to provide for 30 days notice of circulation, specifically to Lethbridge County for this particular type of process. It is lumped in with the area structure plan process. The county did review the area structure plan and had no concerns whatsoever and provided that feedback. Now, we did provide this plan as circulation to the county. However, we couldn't accommodate the 30-day timeline with respect to that. Now, I've had an opportunity to speak with Ryan as a representative of 845 Developments. Made it quite clear that it's very important to us to receive that feedback from Lethbridge County. However, given the lack of significant concern with the area structure plan process and given the rather sort of technical nature of an outline plan, we're not forecasting significant concerns from the county. So what we are proposing is that we're going to get the county's feedback likely in early August. And our recommendation reflects that, to say that we do believe that it's important for the passing of the outline plan so that detailed engineering can begin. And we just made it sure that the developer understands that if we approve that, we're still going to receive the county's feedback, and if the county's feedback requires for us to provide some consideration to amendments to the plan, then we're going to take that forward for council's consideration at the earliest available opportunity, which would be early September. I'm not forecasting that there will be significant changes that are required, but if that's the case, so be it. We definitely want to hear what the county has to say. But at the same time, we want to give the developer and their engineers an opportunity to get moving now so that they have the potential to perhaps capture some of the existing construction seasons. So we believe that's a reasonable trade-off. It doesn't meet the technical guideline of the IDP, but I do believe it meets the spirit and intent of it. So from that perspective, our recommendation is to adopt the outline plan with a note that if the county's feedback comes back with requirements for consideration before council, that we'll take that forward immediately and give that consideration its due process. And Ryan has agreed that that's perfectly reasonable. He understands that there's a certain amount of risk associated with that, but they're willing to take that.
Okay, thank you. I just have a quick question. Have we received any correspondence from the most southerly landowner that decided to pull out?
We have not. Actually, what's interesting with this plan, and to bring that point up, one of the things that did need to occur was to, coming from the area structure plan, was to move where sort of the main entry point of the utility corridor would be, because the original plan called for that to come through that southern lot. And it was in this plan, as you may have noticed, it now does move over to the lot that's currently occupied by Live Electric. I've engaged in some direct consultation with the folks from Live Electric, as has Ryan as the representative of 845 Developments, and they've come to an agreement to allow for that to occur. So it looks like we're going to be able to have that corridor through that lot without any issues with respect to how that's going to work, which is obviously wonderful news. But no, we have not received any correspondence from the adjacent landowner since the area structure plan was passed.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Chapman?
Follow up on your question, would that put Live Electric into, like you've got them in a phase 4 utilities scenario, would that move them up further up into like a phase 1 or 2 or 3?
Thank you for the question. It sort of depends. Live Electric's lot, they're not really looking at it as an opportunity for immediate subdivision anyway. The utilities will certainly be there, and if they want to potentially subdivide that out of sequence, it won't really, from my perspective, is unlikely to cause any serious issues in terms of sort of bungling the capacities of the plant. But generally speaking, no.
Thank you. So the recommended motion is that council adopt the 845 Developments Limited Outline Plan as presented, and furthermore direct administration to receive feedback from Lethbridge County and prepare an amendment to the outline plan for council's consideration at a future council meeting should administration deem it required to satisfy concerns raised by Lethbridge County in accordance with the intermunicipal development plan. Any questions or comments on that? Could I get someone to entertain making that motion, or of the other 3 options, please? Councillor Chapman.
I'll make that. Mayor, and I anticipate that won't affect any arrangement or discussion back and forth with the county.
I
Or
imagine.
yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Cameron, and thank you for coming out. Okay, we're just going to move ahead to item 8.2. We have discussion regarding the Civic Square optional add-on items, and we have Jesse Poitrie here that's going to be presenting along with who's going to be helping him on that one. Okay. So Jesse's from FWBA Architects, and we have Dustin Yanke. So the floor is yours.
The presentation, it's in your package, I believe, too, but I guess I could just, it would be nice if I could flip through.
Lana will just get it going here for you.
Perfect. So, in coordination with the administration, they had asked that I come forward to present some options that council may be wishing to consider in terms of new Coaldale Civic project. Do I have control? Can I use the mouse? Okay. Actually, can I do this? I'm just going to scroll. Right, so these are the items that we'll be talking about today. The first item up here is the atrium's windows. You'll see in the renderings on the top image on the left and right, there are south and west facing windows, and we had always designed to have window blinds in place, but when the budget was tendered, the costs due to COVID, we had to spend more money on steel and so on. We were looking for easy items that we could cut and add on later. So this is one of the items. We feel they would be very helpful to have should there be an event where you need to see a screen, for example. But they aren't absolutely necessary. The electronics are in place so that they can plug the blinds in. I guess it's an easy add-on later on.
So just to confirm then, it's all roughed in, it's just a matter of putting the shades in themselves.
Yeah, and the controls, yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, of course, it is easier to do while there's no furniture in there and so on, if they have a lift and stuff, but I don't imagine it's,
And maybe just for the easier presentation, I'm going to open it up to council
Yeah.
after we go through each one of these. So is there any questions, comments on the sunshades?
Jesse, would that be something that you see as something we could wait on at a later time? It's just not a impending or a critical budget item right now.
That's right. I mean, you look at spaces in the city of Lethbridge. I'm thinking of the Galt. They had to add in some stuff to their facility to make it finished. Right, kind of afterwards they added that ceiling in. You got the ceiling here, but now you got the sun. So it'll still be definitely a usable space. It's just if you we have a projector set up in there, so if you did want to have like a wedding or a presentation, like a slideshow or something, it might be difficult to see depending on when that wedding is. And I'm thinking like summertime, the sun's going to be shining through there in the evening, right? So that's the only concern I can imagine right now. Other than that, I don't see there being a significant impact in the near term, right? So.
Or maybe just add to that light glare onto the second floor offices and that dining or kitchen area.
Possibly, I don't.
Yeah, say around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock when the sun is horizontal.
Okay, and that extra carries a $35,000 price tag.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the, sorry, Councillor Saylor.
I was just curious, putting these in, would they have any sort of significant impact on our cost savings for heating and cooling the building? Like keeping the sun out in the summertime, is it going to make much of an impact?
Some, I don't have the numbers on that, but normally, the exterior shades help with the most with that, right? Because the sun is still coming through the window, heating that shade up.
Add as well. Administration feels that this, because it's roughed in, we could add it in the future. So our recommendation would be to feel it out, see how the sun is in the space once we're actually in there. Because, I mean, these models they're great, but I mean, when we're actually in there, we'll know how bad the sun actually is. So I just wanted to add that in there as a tidbit from our perspective.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. That was my question. Seeing the sun, like right now, we'd be sitting in there. It would be coming right down on council in them chambers. So as to do it after, you're going to have a lift put in there, move around on that floor and anything that's in there. So would we save any money waiting? It'd be a big thing. But it's still, you're going to traipse around on it.
I would say than it is to just because of that. Lights on people on site already, things are already opened up. I don't know what it would be later on, but costs, they don't go down usually, so.
And what's the timeline to get those in if that's something council desires to do now?
It's really, a fairly short lead time in terms of ordering these shades. I don't expect it to, if we got approval today, it wouldn't add anything. But if you wait maybe another month or two, it might it might impact things at that point. They still do require time to review the shop drawings and of course order the products and then install them, right? So.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions on the sunshades? Okay, moving on to the exterior color shifting LED lights.
The rendering's so hard to see, but yeah, we were asked by administration to look at some color changing options, a more permanent solution that would not be string lights, I guess. So this would be for events. So these would be permanent fixtures mounted on the side of the building. And what we've done in this concept is mounted short little fixtures in between each of the windows, and then broadcast that up in between the windows so that you get that effect at night. We looked at a lot of options. One of the options that was originally proposed was we have existing kind of cylindrical lights on the side of the building, was to switch those to color changing lights. We initially thought you could get them in color changing, but it turns out you can't. You can get them in a single color, so you can just pick one color. They don't color change. So we've worked with some lighting suppliers to look at various options in terms of what is available. And this option seemed to be the least impactful in terms of the exterior finish wise, to be modifying things, running tons of new conduit and boxes and so on. The look of the building, I guess we want to keep that clean on the outside, so we're not having exposed things on a brand new building, of course. These lights are not cheap though, and this rendering, it kind of shows how far it goes a little bit. It's just on the east half of it, I guess you could say, where that cornice line comes out. So you kind of have the more traditional side and the modern side. It's just the traditional side that would be lit up with these color changing LEDs for that budget price. But then you would be able to control them individually and run them however you want. They would color shift and change however your imagination could.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. There's two questions. Number one, the lighting from the ceiling side, is that just on two sides, or are we going to do all four sides through the building? So east and north, or just, okay. So there'll be three sides?
It's, but only on the north and the south, it's only half. You have the main entry, that big wood feature,
Yeah.
that is not being proposed in this budget. We do have a budget number for that, if you wanted to add on lighting kind of around the west side as well, and the north. But it does add quite a bit more money because those fixtures are fairly pricey. So I do have it here if you wanted me to. Yeah, it would be about the same, about 46,000 to do the other half of the building as well. So that would include lighting at each of the archways down the west wing, which in discussions with administration that could also be solved with lampposts to light that area. So you could limit it to say just the main entry feature, and which would reduce that cost by a number. I don't have the breakout cost on me, but I would say a fair amount.
And just a quick point on that, my understanding is that the rough end for that west wall is complete. You don't necessarily have to commit to the fixture in order to do something with it. Part of the discussion that we've been having internally is that on that west side there is that connective walkway and a landscaping. Depending on what the design of that looks like, we might be able to have a more context-specific lighting strategy for that walkway that's more for the pedestrian scale than having it lit up with the same colors on the other side, more for people to see from afar. So I would just caution committing to the west wall until we know what the landscaping looks like along that connective walkway.
Final question on this topic. The lights proposing, I think it is that we're, no. At the brick ledge, okay. Just concerned about vandalism or damage or being buried in the snow or something like that.
It'd be out of reach.
Okay.
Ground level's actually down here, and then it's just the brick right here because it shows up fine on my monitor.
It's above the brick.
Thank you.
Yeah, so these are the windows into the offices, and then all the suites below for the tenants is black, I guess, right now.
Any further, Councillor Beekman?
Thank you. Just for clarity, I think this was already said, but I just want to make sure that, so we'll be roughed in for it no matter what.
Rough these in, because every light requires a box, and so it is a fair amount of work.
Okay.
And so currently, the cladding guys have been put on pause because they're ready to go and cover this area up. But the contractor decided that if you guys go ahead, it would be a much simpler process for them to be able to put that in before they clad, right? And also more cost effective for you, right? So you don't have to take off the cladding and then install the walks and then put the cladding back on. So, so currently there is a time-sensitive nature to this side of the building, which is why I think I wanted to highlight this side in terms of a decision-making process, right? So.
Okay, so to follow up on that then, is there a cost to rough in for future, to future do the lights? I'd rather not have a big expense of delaying it, but if we can rough in but not go the big expense of the lights, I'd like to know that alternative.
So the budget to do the east side is about, I think, 15,000 rough in. That'd probably be a safe budget, I would say.
And then, like you mentioned, Jesse, with the cladding, so no matter what we decide, there won't be any surface conduit if we make our decision here tonight on that then.
It's a lot easier, yeah, for
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
Okay. Any last questions regarding the lighting? Okay, let's move on to the next one. North sidewalk flags and planter.
So I did just receive a pricing on this, but I don't have the breakout cost because some of the sidewalks would have had to been replaced anyway under the contractor's scope because they removed them for the foundations. And some of, I think along the east was due to be replaced anyway. So those, I do have a cost on it, but I don't have that breakout number yet. And it's a fairly complicated change. We have a lot of moving parts, a lot of trades involved. So the number I can, Dylan, what is the number that's provided in the budget number you provided?
Yeah, $.
That feels a bit light to me based on the pricing, but I don't have the final number. They give me a rough figure of about 150,000, but some of that is going to be the sidewalks coming out. I don't know. They don't have a breakout on that yet, but the sidewalk portion is, yeah.
Yeah, we'd be interested in seeing the detailed breakdown because that does sound high as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we, but we just only received those preliminary numbers just this evening.
So this is that includes the 4 flag poles, the planters, and the concrete on the north side and east side.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some additional concrete that needed to be removed to make the grades
Yes.
changes. And I know we were on site, Mayor Van Rijn, but for the rest of the council, would you like me to explain kind of what the solution here is?
Sure.
All right. So along the front of the building, there used to be 2 buildings here, if you recall, and the sidewalk slowly slopes down to the east. And the concern was that we wanted to have the floor slab throughout the whole building as one level. So setting it kind of based on the high point, we end up actually with a greater height difference over here on the east side. And that height difference meant that you wouldn't be able to get wheelchairs in and out of those stores or shops or restaurants, right? Because you'd have to have a step there. So in order to kind of keep it all barrier-free accessible, we wanted to look at an option where we could grade the sidewalk to keep it level kind of and keep that barrier-free accessibility. The issue with that though is that you can keep the sidewalk at the same level here, but then the height difference at the parking ends up becoming greater and greater. So we're ending up with, I believe it's about a 400 millimeter height difference at the worst, or it's about 300 to 400. And we felt that was maybe a safety hazard for people to they're not expecting that big of a step if they're going to step off a curb. So what we came up with, there was an option to just put a railing in, which we felt also wasn't a good solution because then people have to walk back into traffic to go around the railing. So in order to keep that kind of pathway clear for people just to get out of their cars and walk straight up, we provided these, I guess, a win-win scenario where the town was looking for an area to put flagpoles, and the planters, what they do is provide a barrier so that people, an indication that there's something different here, and then we actually have steps in between the planters so that they kind of delineate stairs, so that if you're walking down the sidewalk and you're visually impaired, you're going to see something's up here. So that is, and of course all those stairs have indicators on them for visual and tactile. So this, in between each of one of these planters is a set of 3 steps, 1 or 2 steps. And then each of these planters has a bench seat. It's kind of shown in the details here a little bit on the south side, and then of course the flagpole in the middle. And then there has been lighting added to the planter that shines up on the flagpoles as well. So that, and then of course there's irrigation which runs to these plants. So that's kind of the summary form. Yeah.
Kalen, you had your mic on, you have a question?
They're available.
So my understanding is with everything you just described with the flagpoles came in at a $60,000 budget. That's still under the contractor's contract because that sidewalk would have had to be poured regardless, correct?
Yeah, well, the budget number was, I think Kalen and the team had, we had not provided budget to administration, so I'm not sure how that was developed. I can't comment on that part of it.
Okay.
But because we had not received a number until just this evening.
We've gone through a number of different design iterations for the front, and the last we spoke with the developer, this was the option for just doing the concrete. And then you look at the inclusion of the flagpoles, which was something that was new, but based on quotations from other flagpole projects, we just estimated and added that on with the rough numbers. That's why there's going to have to be some serious explanation for the 150, because that is significantly higher than any previous discussions with anyone in regards to this project. So we'll have to go line by line to see where they arrived at that number and see if there's a redesign option, because there is obviously a sticker shock with that that's far outside of any previous discussions we've had about this. And ideally, it would have been nice to have received feedback rather than in an actual council meeting.
Yeah.
So just to clarify then, that 150 budget that you're talking about now, that's strictly for the north side, or that includes the east side as well?
The contractor just lumped everything together.
Okay.
So we don't have a breakout cost.
Okay, so we can table this until could we get those numbers?
They're working with their subtrades to break it out. I haven't had a chance to follow up with them on that yet. So.
Okay. Any other questions on the north sidewalk flags? Deputy Mayor Pickering and then Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'm just curious, so when the elevations were determined on this building, why did that not be looked at on the original plans for the east side and the north side? You started with our sidewalk grades because we just redid Main Street. How did the elevation of that building change that much?
It was because it was 2 buildings, right? So because we wanted to do 1 building and have all we could step the slab on the interior for the lease bays. That was an option available to us. But that was not preferred because if for whatever reason that wall between the atrium and a lease bay, or you have to have steps between them as well, it just limits that connectivity, that barrier-free accessibility between. So I think when you guys, I'm guessing, but when you guys did your Main Street, it wasn't taken into account that there was going to be a single floor slab there over the 2 lots, right? Because I guess it's impossible to predict. I mean, could it have been 3 or 4 or 5 lots? I don't know. It's hard to know these things ahead.
So just to clarify what Jack's saying, that estimate doesn't include the east side.
No, it does.
It does,
It's
but
included.
isn't that the contractor's
Some of
responsibility?
this, yes, some of this cost is already included in the price of the contract.
Okay.
So
thank
I don't
you.
know what portion of that is the item I'm not sure about.
Administration to work with, figure it out. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just sticking with those with the flagpole quote, and I know that 150. That's not an ironclad quote, but have you received multiple bids on that, or are we just going with one comfortable contractor? Again, that 150 there was a lot of shock value there.
I know that the flagpoles that we specified are the tilt type with the 25-foot poles. So they're a fairly nice pole, I guess, a commercial pole. I actually don't have a breakout for what the actually I do have a breakout for the flagpoles. The portion of that was about 20,000 flagpoles and the concrete bases.
In general, though, I'm assuming that the flagpoles and the concrete work would be done by one contractor. And has there been multiple bids on that job, or is it just sticking with the one?
Yeah. So as the architect, we're not bidding it out right at this point because we have a contractor on site. So Silver Ridge Construction is responsible for tendering that out, and as the representative for Shift Real Estate, we're just reviewing those costs as they come in and ensuring their scopes are covered and the scopes are the pricing seems reasonable and fair between the contractor and the owner. Silver Ridge may have gone to multiples, but that's not really our job at this point, and that is the risk of change orders in general, right? Because you do have the option to tender out things as much as you go, right? But there is complications that come with that as say you have one person doing one bit of concrete and then another person doing another bit of concrete because you're trying to save money. Well, now if there's a problem and one contractor damages the other person's concrete, you can have issues there as well, right? So trying to get things fixed in terms of deficiencies or warranty items can have a lot of complications and people pointing fingers at each other. So you do often see change order pricing not as competitive as if you were to stipulate bid the whole project from the beginning, and that's often why we recommend trying to get all the changes that you want to see in prior to bidding, right? So we're coming at this really late in the game. The project's almost done, right? So there's, I guess, less options available, let's put it that way.
Go ahead.
And I guess this is more of a hindsight question, but normally when designing and developing a municipal government building, wouldn't flagpoles be an essential something planned in? Like if we're coming at this late in the game, were flagpoles never a factor in the first place?
I have to talk to administration on that. I'm not.
Kaylin's got some comments on that.
Yeah, just a couple things. In speaking with the developer, they haven't awarded the concrete contractor, so they're still willing to go out to bid for that. So it's not going to be sole source to someone that's predetermined and hence, cost premium. It's still something that they're able to get multiple quotes on. In terms of the flagpoles, there's one of two schools of thought. Either it gets incorporated into the outdoor space in the rear and then tabled for that design process, which will be taking place, over the next 6 to 12 months. The other option is look for a place to affix the poles onto existing bulb outs on Main Street. This was an epiphany that took place sometime during the brainstorming process of how to deal with the grade issue. And the idea was put forth of why don't you just look at incorporating steps so it looks like more of a deliberate architecture in a way that deals with the need to put flagpoles all in one project. The part that we didn't know we liked. And that's where we're going to have to work with Jesse and his team to backtrack on where that number came from and what alternatives there could be, because that does seem significantly higher than what any of our expectations were when we were brainstorming about that type of design.
Thank you. Councillor Chow, any other question?
I'm just thinking about accessibility and traffic flow in and out of the buildings, are you expecting that the public or people will enter the building from the north doors and from the south doors, or there can also be doors on the east side for independent access to the office, to the independent businesses?
Yes, there's doors on all sides except the west. And so the council or the town doors are on the kind of the west, northwest and southwest sides of it, and then around the northeast, southeast, and east side are the lease bay entrances. So the grades along the east side are not a concern. It's just we have I guess a low point on the northeast causing the grade.
So people still can come in, like say from the north or from the south, and access the businesses as well?
Yeah.
From the inside, so?
Yeah, there was no concern on the east. The grades there are fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, when this comes up for discussion, we're just going to table the north sidewalk flags and planter discussion then. Okay, moving on to council chamber doors.
All right, so we're looking at a few different options here. The option that we currently have in the contract right now with the contractor is fixed glass with 2 swing doors. So there's a glass door here and a glass door here on the left and right. And the glass is kind of like a frameless style glass. The intent there was that we wanted council to be perceived as an open and egalitarian space where residents can, they could come in the atrium, they could bring their kids up to the glass, they could look at and see council, or actually come in and sit, obviously, right? So that was kind of the dream about having all the glass there. And but we know there's concerns obviously with closed sessions, so that's why I've made a note on here to add a blinds or a curtain for a closed session onto these glass would be about the $7,500, and that's all that would be required to make this kind of operational for the day-to-day. We do have the TVs. I'd like to point out here too, this TV and this TV here, spots for them anyway to connect them, so that you could have participants watching a stream on those TVs. And this was another one of those items that we were cost saving out of. We originally looked at it as a cost savings because the pivot doors, which I'll get to in the next option, which we had initially proposed, were fairly expensive, and you'll see they are again expensive. So, in order to be kind of more cost conscious, we took those out earlier in the design process before it even made it to bid, and provided this solution, working with administration. So the next option is the glass pivot doors. And I have an example here on the right, which just shows how you open up multiple of them and you get something that feels kind of open. And that's kind of what this drawing is conveying, that you have kind of one piece of glass that pivots in 2 directions, I guess. You can see the swing there, so that you actually just have 1, 2, 3 panes of glass that are kind of interrupting that view and back and forth. So the pivot glass that we have the pricing for, the budget pricing for, $27,000, and it part of the issue with that price is that the cost for glass has gone up about 60%. This costs more now than it, because of escalation. So. So the glass pivot doors that we have in here, they do have some acoustic separation into them, so they have some kind of frame around there, similar to this photo, so that you'll have some kind of acoustic seal there. And then, of course, this budget includes some kind of blinds or curtain as well for a closed session. The next option, kind of the premium one, let's put it that way. You can get folding acoustic glass walls that kind of they stack up on the side, like in this image here, and this is a curved one. Part of the challenge with this room is that it's curved, right? So finding curved solutions was a bit of a challenge to try and work through with suppliers, because most people just provide things for straight walls. So this one, operable walls traditionally are a bit of a lead time item. So I've noted that, you know, it could be 2 months or more depending on, you know, when the decision's made to get this product kind of ordered and en route. So, but it's, yeah, the most expensive option. And this would include, again, some kind of blinds or curtain, a glass wall. This one is probably the most budget-friendly option, let's put it, other than the status quo, because it's only 8,500. Roughly, this is a budget number. I actually don't have a quote on this one. We were just working with the suppliers directly to get some ballpark figures on this. And this is, I know accordion doors maybe feel cheesy to a lot of people, but they do serve a function, I guess. And yeah, when we originally discussed this, we're like, oh great, it's a cheap option, and it kind of solves the closed camera session, right? The downside to it though is that the default position is closed, right? So if you're show up for a council meeting, I don't know if someone's going to go through the effort of opening it up every single council meeting, or if you just happen to leave it closed, then it just limits that transparency you would have with glass, right? So this one is a kind of a more budget-friendly sliding glass wall. It's not quite as acoustically sound as that other one. It does provide some acoustics, and actually we've used it on, this is Cold Banks Elementary School where we used it on the left here. And it's not, like the other movable glass wall, it's not curved panels, they're segmented panels. Just these ones, the track on the ground is segmented versus the one the ground track actually gets curved. So this one, yeah, it's more of a budget option. You kind of get the same budget, less of a budget feel, or more of a budget feel, I guess you could say, but it still would work as an option. Those are the 5 options, and this would include, again, the price for blinds or curtain. So,
Any questions for Jesse regarding the council chamber door options? Councillor Chapman.
Mayor, could you give us, Jesse, give us an example of where these doors that fold out, I think it's your number 2, that one there, just for quick comparisons, where you've seen those being used?
I have seen them. The pivot hinge hardware is a premium, no doubt, but I think the biggest cost here is the glass. You have to have a huge sheet of glass, and so I haven't actually seen them locally used. Pivot hinges locally used in a project that I can think of. So I don't have a good example, unfortunately. A local example. They've been used in lots of architectural projects around the world, and people use them all over. They are a well-known product. They're not a foreign product, I guess. It's like a brand new thing. I'm not inventing the wheel here. It's just maybe not locally as used as much. Let's put it that way.
So City Hall, for example, uses glass doors, but they're like a barn door, or like these doors here, they swing out.
Yeah, that's right.
So the difficulty I'd have with this example, just for argument's sake, is that you're taking up space on both sides, and I think there would be some compromises and along the way. So I just wanted to know if these are popular somewhere else.
No. We were just looking for a solution for a curved wall, really. That was kind of cost effective. It was kind of the impetus for this, right? So.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you. I guess the curved wall is throwing you a bit of a curveball, eh? Yeah. So on that first option, the fixed glass with the 2 opening doors, that's what's already been budgeted for, and that 7,500 would be for blinds. In theory, wouldn't we have to do 7,500 for blinds for all glass options, or are those other options? Those aren't inclusive of blinds.
I've added the 7,500 to all of the glass options.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the glass doors? Seeing none, we'll move on to the living wall.
So this is a photo of this site taken a couple weeks ago now, at this point, but there's in kind of the central atrium space, I'm standing up on the lunch area looking down, and this is kind of the main center wall in the space, and it's recessed, and there's actually a plumbing fixture here, not plumbing fixture, a pipe for water. So it was designed as a place to have plants, but it was always a furniture item, kind of as an owner supplied item. The contractors doesn't have anything in their budget for this, for finishing this other than painting the wall. So if we do nothing, it'll just be a step in the wall with a pipe. Kind of that's option one. Option two, this was the vision that we had rendered at one point. And a living wall is plants that are, of course, alive and living in your space. And so there's a lot of places that have these, mostly bigger places. Some corporate places have them as well. They kind of add a really nice element to the space, I feel like, because there's a lot of hard rectilinear surfaces in here, and the plants give it kind of that softer feel. It kind of brings nature inside, right? So obviously it is expensive, though. The budget is fairly high, and then on top of that you have maintenance of about, depends on if you hire it out or not, but the company that does all the maintenance for locally here, I think they quoted, what, $650 a month, so it adds up to be quite a bit over a year, if you $7,000, right? So that you can get a variety of designs, and they look after it. If the plants die, they kind of come look after it. They can be finicky to manage in terms of keeping plants alive, I've heard. So that's kind of a consideration there. The moss wall, I have maintenance on here, but I should have taken that off because they look alive, they're not actually alive. They require no maintenance. So it's not actually a living wall. You just pay the upfront costs for it, and then you're good, you're done. It's just like a picture on the wall. So these are smaller ones, but the budget price here is to cover that whole giant area. And kind of the left-hand side is the cheaper, and the right-hand side is the more expensive option. Kind of the more different types of mosses you get, the more bark and wood and stones and stuff. So you can see the budget range there. And that's it. That's right. There's just three options.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jesse regarding the living wall, Councillor Saylor?
How big is that space? Like, what are the dimensions of that wall right there? Yeah.
It's large. I could look it up. I could look it up for you here in a sec if you want exact dimensions.
You can see by the sheets of drywall, they're 12 footers, it looks like.
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that recessed area. Any other questions regarding the living wall? Just a question to our CAO. So was there a mention of a company that will come and do maintenance for free if they get the clippings? Is that accurate, or?
No, it was a dream come true.
Okay.
Too good to be true, sorry.
Okay.
But I did do a bunch of digging on that. So in the rendering, you'll notice we have like trees in here. They will actually do those type of plants for zero upfront and kind of a lease payment. They're the company in town that does them for Park Place Mall, the college, and a bunch of other big places. They will come and do everything. If the tree dies, they have to replace it, right? So they do everything for that. If you wanted to look at that for the actual plantings in the atrium, just not the wall. They just don't do the lease.
So if we rent out this space for a wedding, would those be on wheels that they can be moved, or they would have to work the tables around them?
That was the design intent originally, that we would have those on, they'd be movable, yeah, on some kind of caster or something. Yeah, lockable caster.
Okay. Last chance, questions for Jesse on any of the items that he discussed? So just to recap then, what's the most time-sensitive items?
The lighting and the council chamber doors would be second after that, I think, right? So the other ones can wait. I mean, well, and I guess the sidewalks we still need to get more info on, but that will be time sensitive soon as well.
Okay, thank you. And our agenda package, the order is a little bit different, I believe. So I'm going to go by what's in the agenda package. So if everybody can find that document.
I think it's up here right now. You want to take back control. Yeah.
Okay, so starting with the living wall, we're looking at 17,000 to 48,000. So, Kalen, do you have anything you want to add to this?
It's not considered a critical item. It has been roughed in. There is a space to accommodate a living wall, if that's the desire of council. It's something that could be added later. It's not going to hold up the opening of the facility in any stretch of the imagination, but it was a good opportunity to check in with council with the initial thought process as well as what the options look like if this is something that council.
And if we were to choose to hold off on this, we could get that primed and painted to match the rest of the space?
Already.
Okay. Councilor Reese, you had a question? So how do you want to do this? Should we discuss and make a motion for each item? Or do you want to do it lump it? How do you guys want to do it? Pardon me? Okay. Go ahead, Councilor John. Or sorry, Councilor Reese.
I was just going to offer to table the green wall and the wall, and obviously we need to table the sidewalk and flagpoles for now.
Well, I was just gonna say that the shades, that can wait, the wall can wait. I think we need to focus on the lighting, the flags, and the doors.
Okay, so let's deal with the living wall first. So we're going to table that one. And we're going to also table the concrete work until we get further explanation. And what's the feeling on the sunshades? Anybody want those now?
I would just like to ask, if I could, through to Jesse, if the blinds for the top windows and the blinds for council chambers, would they be included as one price, or would they be two totally separate things?
They're separate, so you would, yeah, I mean, if you did them at the same time, you'd probably save on some mileage and, you know, supplier, but it would be a small amount, I think. I wouldn't force it to go together at this point. I don't think there's any.
I think for myself, the blinds both ways are important. Once you get settled into the offices, and come fall time, come winter time, I think the sunlight will be at a level that you'll appreciate the blinds starting
Okay.
this winter.
So what I'm going to do then, we're going to do each one individually. Can I get someone to make a motion regarding the living wall? What is your recommendation? Somebody, Councilor Beekman.
I'd like to make a motion to table the green wall in the atrium.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Avery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to see administration bring back some options with, and I mentioned it in an email before, to have local artists do some painting on those walls, because you know, we've got a lot of talented individuals that live in town, and it might be an option with a lot less expense for us.
And that can be an option coming back, but for now, I just need a motion for the green wall. That was made by Councillor Beekman to table. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor of tabling? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now the upgrades to the exterior lighting. The additional electrical rough-in work to accommodate enhanced exterior lighting that can be programmed and color-coded for special events has been approved for action. In order to make these lights a reality, the cost is estimated to be around $45,000, inclusive of labor, fixtures, and general contracting and oversight fees. So, speaking, I think this is a good opportunity for us to have lights up for the different holiday seasons. We've had questions whether or not we could do something for the conflicts that are going on in Ukraine right now. So this would be something exactly the same like the City of Lethbridge does on the front of their City Hall building for different events. So what is your feeling on that one, to make a motion up to $45,000 for the lighting, exterior lighting, or not do it, or table that as well? And if we table that, we're looking at additional expense, because to do it after the fact would be very expensive. I'll open it up to council. Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So just to clarify that was just for the east side and the north?
So it's half the north side and the east side, and half of the south side.
And okay, so on the west side, it won't be roughed in for nothing then?
No, the lighting for the west side will be dealt with when we come up with the landscape and walk pathway.
Okay.
So we can do something there with well lights or whatever. Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, and we do have lighting on kind of the west half of the building that is already in the project. That would just not be color shifting though. It wouldn't be color shifting. So you just have the one color of white or whatever, right? So you could still light it up. It just wouldn't be custom colors for an event.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin, so that entrance to the atrium, that's going to be lit up quite bright on its own? That was in your initial
Yes.
renderings?
Yeah, those light fixtures are still there, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Questions, comments? Someone willing to pick one of those options? Councillor Beekman.
Point here, and maybe I could make a motion, but it'll be separate from that. I'd be more in favor of doing taking care of the $15,000 rough-in right now. Our contingency's down to $60,000 from what was, I believe, $200,000 was our initial contingency on that. And we're still months away, or a couple months away from this project being completed. I hate to deplete 3/4 of our remaining contingency when there's so many more necessaries. So I think taking care of the $15,000 on the rough-in, being prepared for when we can afford nice things, would be would sit better with me. Thank you.
So just a comment on that then. So to offset these additional expenses, or a portion of them, there's, like you said, there's $65,700 remaining in the contingency fund. And then we also have access to $132,300 from reserves from the Northeast Industrial Land Sales that can be earmarked for these extras.
Also just got told that we may have a $150,000 flagpole expense that I'd like to see where that goes out before we commit $45,000 to the lighting project. But I would like to, personally would like to see that we are roughed in and ready for it. If it takes a year to get the lights installed, at least be ready for it.
Sounds good. So you're making that a motion?
Yeah. The council approve $15,000 or up to $15,000 for the rough-in for the for future lighting.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the $15,000, up to $15,000 for roughing in? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to, yes.
$15,000 for rough-in and table, or was it just $15,000 for rough-in period, just for clarity?
Yeah, $15,000 for the rough-in and table the fixtures.
And explain the tabling of the fixtures until we can afford them, you mean?
We get the, once we get the rest of the expenses, all nailed down to what the overages are gonna be, and then we table it till then.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the, is that good enough for you then, Kalen, that explanation? Yes. Okay, moving on to the council chamber doors. Is status quo fixed glass with 2 doors for $7,500. Option 2, glass pivoting doors for $27,000. Option 3, folding glass doors for a complete opening, $45,000. Option 4 is a wood accordion door for $8,500. And this is a time-sensitive item. And the only comment I'm going to make for that is when a good example is if we have a public hearing and we have a large gallery, opening up the space completely to make people feel included instead of looking through some glass doorways would be my. Any other
Can you
questions,
repeat that?
comments?
Sorry?
Councillor Reese, sorry.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
So if you envision a public hearing and we have 40, 50 people with the folding glass doors where you can completely open up that curved space to make people feel more inclusive instead of them trying to look through partial glass or partial door openings, that would be the best way for that. Councillor Saylor?
Sorry, I just thought of something there. So I got a question with these, the folding acoustic doors. Would we need blinds then? Because if it's acoustic doors, would they not be soundproof? Isn't that the idea of the blinds? Would they be 30 something then?
We don't
would
want
it?
anybody seeing us yelling at each other in closed session.
That's true too, I guess.
Ease off potentially and just having it on your computer possibly, but that's a consideration, I think.
Kalen?
One other potential alternative if council didn't want to fund the blinds portion, some municipal councils meet in a separate meeting room for their closed session. So they'll actually leave chambers and retreat to a different meeting room for that purpose. But there are some logistical concerns, and depending on which municipality you speak to, some like that practice and others don't like that practice. Round out the discussion.
Deputy Mayor Pickering?
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I think we should, considering this building is being built and we want it to look right and be right, it's going to be there for what, 30, 40 years or more? I think we should go with the option of this sliding glass to make you say open it up and make it more visible and nicer looking.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Mayor. Speaking in favor of the sliding glass door, I would support the budget for $45,000, but I do want to see if there's one more option out there where you can actually slide the doors like they would just sort of not stack, but when they're fully extended, when they're fully opened out, that they're like 1, 2, 3 side by side instead of accordion. Oh, it is in there?
Yeah.
Is that, it's just on a track, so is that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of options for operable walls out there. Like there's a lot of options, but because we're on a curve and because we don't have any hanging door, it has to sit on a roller on the ground.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're limited to those two things, and those are kind of the best. The options I brought forward are kind of the two. The one is the folding, and then the other one is the stacking.
Right.
So.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
like Mikasa, okay. Anyway, the
So, Councillor Chapman, was that?
motion's on the floor.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion on the floor for folding glass doors for a complete opening for up to $45,000 in additional cost. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question on Councillor Chapman's motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Avery opposed. Motion carried. Thank you. Powered blinds in the atrium. So the ability to equip the atrium with power blinds on the south and west walls comes at a cost of $35,000. So that is something we spoke about earlier, that does not need to be done, so that's an option as well. It's all roughed in for the blinds, so we can motion to table or motion to spend up to $35,000 for the installation. I'll open it up for any discussion from council.
Mayor, and just thinking on Councillor Beekman's thoughts about tabling some items till we get our contingency fund, sorted out, and especially with these other options, with this other issue with the flagpoles and that expense, I would just assume, I would like to see us just table this till we get through the first few months and see where we're at on that item and how the inside looks for lighting issues throughout the winter.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Chapman to table the powered blinds in the atrium. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And I just need someone to make a motion that we, unless, I don't think we did that already, did we? The north sidewalk and 4 flag posts. I don't think we've made that motion yet. We're tabling the concrete work and the flag poles. No, Councillor Chapman took it, so there's a motion by Councillor Chapman to table the north sidewalk and flag and 4 flag posts until we hear back from contractor on the breakout costs for that. And just to be clear, the east side is part of the contract.
Yes.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Chapman. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Jesse, that bordered on being painful. Thank you. No, good job on your presentation. We look forward to hearing about the concrete work tomorrow. Yeah.
Jeez, okay. So I gotta go. Yeah, yes, and it's not my, because we're contracted through Shift Real Estate, it's, they're the owners on this project, right? And we're contracted to them to advise them. But I know in speaking with them that there is an issue, I guess, with all the incremental changes, and especially with the council motion that was just approved for the operable wall that folds out of the way. There was additional time that's going to be needed for that as well, right? So there's extra, well, potentially, I guess it depends on. With COVID, there's a lot of items that you think would become quick and ship quickly, but there's back orders on certain things, for example, hardware, and one of them, right? And doors we know as well, right? So because this is a door with hardware, I'm just cautious, I guess. Let's put it that way. So one of the things that I think Shift may be approaching the town with sooner is extending the contract out and having those general conditions extend out as well. So because of all the small changes that have been adding up, so and the timing of them, I guess, right? So, but that's something that you'll have to work out.
We'll have that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you again, Jesse.
Yep.
Dustin?
We'll have a car for
Okay.
the parade.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, moving on to item 7.1, bylaw 856-P-07-22 regarding the West Coaldale Area Structure Plan Amendment. First reading, we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Van Rijn. The opportunity to present here again to council on this evening. Bylaw 856-P-07-22 is the West Coaldale Area Structure Plan Amendment. And what we're proposing here is consideration, potentially a first reading of this bylaw in order to review the recently submitted West Coaldale ASP Amendment, which provides guidance and to the orderly development of lands within, generally within the civic address of 2301 30th Street and 2215 30th Street, within the northwest of 100920 West 4, which is to say the lands directly to the west of the existing Westgate subdivision, as well as to the west of the existing the north side of 23rd Avenue in those areas. Golf course. So I've prepared, obviously my report contains a certain amount of detail. Has had an opportunity to read it, and I'll provide an overview here. What we're proposing here today is reading of a bylaw. So we'll just go over a little bit, just for council's pleasure and for anyone reading it or listening at home, a bit about the purpose of an area structure plan, just so we have quite clear. We'll talk a bit about the plan location, the proposal, some of the considerations we think administratively are important at this part of the process, and really those considerations are important when we look at this from a first reading perspective, and also provide a recommendation. An ASP, or an area structure plan, is something that's clearly outlined in the municipal government, and it's a statutory plan for the purpose of providing a framework for subsequent subdivision and development of an area of it provides for a very high level requirement in terms of what must be in an area structure plan, and that provides for the sequence of development, the land proposed generally or specifically, a density of population, but again, generally or specifically. It can really contain any other matters that are deemed. There tends to be some flexibility with respect to a city of Calgary might do an area structure plan that is the size. When we look at area structure plans in a town our size, it tends to be on a quarter section basis or a smaller basis, sometimes a little larger, but they do. That's generally speaking what an area structure plan does. It is a step in the planning process. The town plan talks about them a little bit. Again, a statutory plan referencing the Municipal Government Act, and provides and outlines general development goals and patterns. And again, talking about how it's statutory plan in accordance with the MGA that identifies future neighborhoods and where residential, commercial, institutional, and recreational sites will be located in a previously undeveloped area, and how essential municipal services such as water and sewer system, roads, fire protection will be provided. Again, we interpret that generally. These plans also describe the number of people that are expected to live in a newly developed area and how development will be staged over time. The area structure plan process, or rather the development process, looks like this. So what we're talking about is the approval of the area structure plan. And that is something that occurs over a process of 3 readings, and that's important. So what we're proposing tonight is step 1 of the first step listed here. So there are 5 steps listed here. We're not proposing step 1, we're proposing the first step of step 1. The approval of the area structure plan would have approval of first reading of the plan, which provides for general guidance and sort of brings life to the bylaw. Following that, you have a public hearing where the public's invited to provide their comments in addition to what's already been incorporated into the document. And following that, we have an opportunity for second and potentially third reading of the plan. Once the area structure plan is completed, then administratively we look on to looking at detailed servicing plans, so some of the engineering and some of the math associated with calculating exactly how water and sewer and storm are going to be flow and be provided throughout that area, and provide those detailed engineering design. And then we would have consideration of rezoning application, and following that subdivision application approval. It is after step 4 where, you know, a member of the general public might drive by and see work being done, which is to say, after step 4, that's when we might see roads being built or services being installed. That's when the neighborhood would start to take shape physically. And then following the construction of the infrastructure, the roads, and the creation of the lots that happens as a part of stage 4, then lots might be sold and individual buildings might be built. And again, those buildings have a permitting process associated with them, the potential for realistically the requirement for development permits. So we look at the individual building scale at that type of the individual property, make sure those properties comply with our municipal bylaws, with whatever's in these various plans, and that's how ultimately a neighborhood is fully built out. So it's important. I realize as council you've heard some of this before, but it's really important for us when we talk to the general public so they understand what it is we're talking about here. As a meeting, it is really a sort of step 1 of a fairly long process. So the planned location I've highlighted in yellow. It's at the west end of the community, west of Westgate, north of the golf course. The plan area, the amendment does technically include 4 parcels because there is an element of the lands associated with the church site that are included in that area, as well as the nursery, Coaldale Nurseries, which is on the northern end. They're not part of developing the plan simply because what's proposed is really not changing them at all. The reason they're included in the plan is because they are identified as still being areas within a broader plan that's being amended that are still underdeveloped, and we recognize that, but there is no proposed changes to those areas, so they're fundamentally unaffected by it. And the reason we're calling this an area structure plan amendment is because an area structure plan does actually exist for this area. It's part of the same area structure plan that would have accommodated the Westgate subdivision and the Waterfront, thank you. I always forget that. Waterfront subdivision and a few others. And actually, part of what was complicated about this process, this is a plan that was developed, passed in 2003, so it was really developed before 2003, 20 plus years ago. It was developed during a time when planning was perhaps done a little bit differently than it's done now. And some of the areas within the plan have been developed that aren't necessarily arguably perfectly in accordance with the plan. But regardless of that, we don't want to make, even if we feel like perhaps mistakes were made in the past in terms of skipping some of the steps, we're not interested in making similar mistakes. We're going to make sure that this area is planned appropriately, and we're going to amend the area structure plan first and make sure that we have a good guiding document that will allow for the additional subdivision development of this area. We think that's the right way of doing it. So the proposal itself is shown here. Now this shows the entire area structure plan area, but it doesn't show the map of that would have been passed from this 2003 area structure plan. Rather, this is a map that shows within the areas on the right side the actual design in terms of what was built within the plan area and the actual zonings that are applied to those areas. And then the area in question is really the areas that show up. We show 2 zonings there. So there's a purple area on the western side of the map, sort of in the middle. That represents a proposed high density area for this development. And then to the south of that, in the red shading, is the proposed single family residential component of this particular area. So we just want to make that clear. So we've got higher density residential proposal on the north side, bordering 23rd Avenue, and the proposal really calls for the sort of more higher scale high density residential north of 23rd Ave, so the potential for things like low-rise apartment buildings or intensive higher density areas being in that area. And then to the south of 23rd Avenue, still in that high density area, but we're talking more in the duplex townhouse type range. So still moving a little bit lower density, though not from a zoning perspective. And then as you move south, the proposal is for single-family residential lots. One of the things that's of note, and I think warrants some discussion with council at this point, is that the proposal does call for the R1B designation, which is a higher density single-family residential zoning than what is found in the Westgate subdivision. So the Westgate subdivision is the R1A zoning, which is the typical zoning that we might find in most of the neighborhoods in Coaldale. So that's a 50-foot lot as a minimum width. And the developer here is proposing R1B throughout, which provides for a 40-foot width, which is a 20% increase in
What is that
potential
comparable to Parkside?
Parkside is largely R1C, which I believe has a 35-foot width. So it's a little bit, it's sort of in between. There is some R1B that's shown here on the map. And certainly the developer is suggesting that there would be a mix of zonings or a mix of lot sizes. So just because the minimum lot size is 40 foot doesn't mean that you can't create a 50-foot wide R1B lot. But from my perspective, if 40 foot is allowed, my expectation, having been on that side of the fence, is that, you know, if there's an opportunity for creating more lots, that's typically seen. So if we're allowing for 40-foot lots, we have to be comfortable with the idea of the developer coming back with all of the lots being at the size, even though they may not all be the case. So that is one thing that we will want to discuss in terms of how we want to see this plan changed, if at all, prior to putting it out to the public and having One of the other elements, there's a pathway that's shown. It's shown incorrectly here in the map because they have made some changes to the text of the plan. It's shown as a yellow line bordering the northern side of the high-density residential portion, and that is actually being proposed on the southern portion of the high-density residential portion, so bordering 23rd Avenue. And then running to the stormwater management facility and then circling the stormwater management facility would be the proposal.
So along 23rd Avenue, would that double as a sidewalk then too?
No, so if the proposal is, so there'd be a sidewalk on the southern portion of 23rd Avenue, likely if you have, say, townhouses, for example, fronting onto that. The lots on the northern portion of 23rd Avenue would be larger lots that might have something like an apartment type complex, which might have some landscaping and then a parking lot. So then this would be an asphalt pathway that would cut through that. Yeah. Additional open space to the proposed is to be proposed as part of the upgrades to the existing stormwater management facility. And that will include park space in the general vicinity of that facility with the exact location depending on finalized stormwater design. So we're still working on what the exact final design will be for the footprint of the stormwater facility, if that's going to be expanded. If it does, it's likely to expand into that easternmost block of high-density residential that's there. And then within that, there will also be some capacity for the installation of a park or a playground, which is being proposed. So there are some key considerations to consider. So what we've really got here is a plan that's a little bit more draft in nature than what would typically be presented to council for a first reading, and we want to acknowledge that. And there are some amendments that administration believes are very important prior to deeming this plan ready for a public hearing. And I do have Jason Siemens with me here today who can speak to some of these if council has any questions about them. But provided for in the report recommended amendments to a number of sections of the plan, particularly with respect to the clearly outlining what will be required with respect to a traffic impact assessment and how that section of the plan should be worded. The stormwater management plan, the plan currently has a significant amount of data, though I would argue that the data is not appropriate or necessarily accurate, and we have a stormwater management plan statement that we believe is more appropriate, which will simply call for something that's going to meet our standards. Changes to the format of the public input and response, I believe, is very important. So one of the things that we found with the industrial area structure plan that was passed was that when we did public input, we have a section of the bylaw, and we do have a section in this proposal that talks about what was heard, but we really like the format of having it in a table, so it's very, very clearly laid out to say, this is what we've heard, this is what we're proposing to do about it. And it's very, very clear with each item what relates to what, and that way when we go back to the public at a public hearing, we say we've already done some public input that's been developer-led or town-led. We have heard some feedback. We're acknowledging that feedback. If we have addressed some of it, this is how we're addressing it, so now we can talk about whether or not that's appropriate. And there are times where we hear, and when I say we, I mean perhaps the development community, where they might hear public feedback and they say, well, I disagree, I don't think we can reasonably address that. But then they're very explicitly acknowledging that they've heard it, and they're very clearly articulating why that isn't being planned, which provides for council, I think, a much more transparent document to say that we are recognizing all of the feedback that we've heard in a way that everyone can. That's very important to me. And I believe more clarity is required on the MR allocation. So we do have a 10% MR allocation. There is some of that that's going to be dealt with respect to the redoing of the stormwater management plan, but we're not satisfied that we have clarity with respect to how that park space is going to be included. And we know from some of the public input that definitely some of the residents of Westgate are going to want to make sure that there's an appropriate MR allocation, and we want to make sure that the plan clearly outlines that prior to taking it public. There are also areas where administratively we would really appreciate some direction from council in terms of how we can, what we can look to respect from this. So the two issues that really come up, and they came up in the public engagement portion that we would like perhaps to address prior to going back to a public hearing is, first of all, the issue of a buffer strip between residential units and the existing Westgate subdivision. So there was some feedback that suggested a preference for a municipal reserve strip to be put between the Westgate subdivision backing to the west onto the parcel. Administratively, like from a pure technical planning perspective, that's not something that, from that perspective, I feel is necessary. If this was, say, a residential neighborhood next to an industrial park, I would see the value of that. We're talking about residential uses potentially backing onto other residential uses, and the fact that this was a field for a period of time doesn't necessarily mean that the folks back in Westgate backing onto that field need to never have neighbors to the west. But that's a purely technical answer from my perspective. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that the developer provide that, and I think it's a perfectly reasonable conversation to have, but some direction from council on whether or not they would expect to see that developed in a plan, provide amendments to the plan prior to bringing it forward for public hearing for second and third reading would be appreciated. And then the other question, and really something that I think is going to warrant some, one thing that I think we're probably going to hear from the general public on is the use of the R1B zoning. This was a little bit of a surprise when the plan was developed. It wasn't something that I was necessarily anticipating seeing. There's nothing technically incorrect or wrong about using the R1B zoning. It's perfectly reasonable zoning. It's something that we can certainly allow for, but realistically speaking, I think that members of Westgate will probably have some pretty serious concerns about the level of density that's potentially being proposed there. And so there might be an opportunity for council to consider the plan as is, perhaps considering the density at this level. Perhaps the developer could be directed to shift all of the single-family residential to an R1A zoning, or perhaps simply the outer edge, the area to the sort of on the western and southern and eastern portion of the loop road, backing onto Westgate and backing onto the golf course might be appropriate for that, with a little more higher density in the interior lots might be appropriate as well, but would certainly like to hear council's feedback on that prior to providing the developer with some direction. Keeping in mind, of course, that any feedback we provide with the developer to make amendments prior to second reading can still be adjusted and changed as part of second reading and potentially third reading. It's not to say that council is making any particular commitment at this point, but would certainly like to know where council leans on that, because that's something that I think is definitely going to come up, and when it's time to hear from landowners. So with that in mind, I'm happy to discuss any elements of the plan with council. Our recommendation at this point, and it's been provided as, I'll perhaps read the recommendation that's provided as part of the decision package, but a recommendation is that council provide first reading of bylaw 856 P722 with amendments as described by administration in the report, and direct administration to prepare the amended bylaw for consideration at a public hearing at an upcoming regular or special council meeting. And I'll add to that in addition to that recommendation, those areas where we suggested council provide us some recommendation also for council to provide some feedback on that.
One more time, say that.
Sorry, in addition to this recommendation, which is the formal direction, some guidance with respect to the issues of the buffer strip and the city would be appreciated as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to council for questions for Cameron. Councillor Avery.
Thank you. So what's the trade-off that he doesn't have to put forward any of his lands for stormwater management? He's got everything expanding our existing pond. So with some previous developers, they had to put extremely large retention ponds in. Now we're going to allow this one with none, and we're fronting him the property for it.
Question you're asking, what is his contribution towards the stormwater? Yeah, thank you. That is a conversation that we've had. So there is an existing stormwater pond, and there's a question as to whether or not the stormwater pond, which is developed for the area, whether or not it has capacity to meet the needs of this area as well. If there is existing capacity within those ponds, then there's a question of who owns that capacity, and I would suggest that the town's position is that the town owns that capacity. So there might be an opportunity to simply take payment for that capacity rather than building a second pond, if a pond isn't necessary, right? So, but we do recognize that it's not necessarily something that we're giving away.
So just to go on Councillor Avery's comment, at the very least, we'll have to be expanding that based on what we see already, because you haven't done those calculations yet.
I can have Jason perhaps speak to it. So there's been some disagreement between our math and some of the developers' math with respect to that. And from our perspective, generally, at the area structure plan stage, we don't need to come to a final calculation with respect to the stormwater management, but I think it's reasonable to expect that there will be some expansion of it, but I'll let Jason speak.
Yeah, I think you pretty much summarized that accurately, Cam. So we're definitely still in conversations as far as the technicalities go, as per, I guess, the exact implication this particular portion of the development will have from a stormwater perspective and how much volume they'll require. But I think one thing that we have been clear with them so far is that whatever that impact is, we will be adding it to the pond as opposed to allowing them to use surplus storage if it is available. So that is the direction we're moving with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and those are all little things we can iron out as part of second and third readings.
Yeah. And I guess further to Councillor Avery's question too is I think from our perspective, yes, there is some benefit. I think there's benefit to both parties to expanding the pond. I think from an infrastructure perspective, it's consistent with our stormwater plan. Our preference is for less larger facilities as opposed to multiple smaller facilities. So I think there's some benefit to the town as well as expanding that facility. We'll have the opportunity to fix some pre-existing operational concerns with that facility. So I think it's a win-win for both of us. It's just a matter of figuring out what that volume is that we're going to be requesting to add.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman, you got a question?
Hearing then is that you could actually expand the water, the pond, the storm pond in Westgate there. You could actually build it bigger or dig it larger, is what I'm hearing. Satisfy everybody.
Correct. Yes, and in fact, it's been nice because the original consultant who worked on the pond for waterfront and Westgate expansions is also the consultant on this, Martin Geomatics, and they've highlighted to us that originally the west side of that pond was not clay lined as you normally see for a wet pond. So yes, it was almost anticipated for expansion to the west. Correct.
Thank you. And just through to Cam then, just reading through the plan here, architectural control, these are some of the things I'd be kind of curious about. Architectural controls, apparently it's the developer has sort of more jurisdiction than the town, than the municipality would have over architectural controls, from what I'm reading there. Is that correct?
Typically, and our architectural controls aren't necessarily something that is addressed like in terms of the specifics at the area structure plan stage. So you might have reference to architectural controls and what generally those will provide, but they tend to be something that's dealt with at the subdivision stage. Ultimately, architectural controls as an instrument are something that is enforced between landowners, and so ultimately, if you buy a property in Cottonwood, for example, which has architectural controls, 50 years from now, long after the developer has exited, sold all the lots and has exited, If you find that your neighbor, for example, is in violation of the architectural controls, it's not a bylaw issue that you come and talk to the town and the town deals with it. You have a covenant with everyone else that is subject to those architectural controls development, and you basically deal with it through the court system.
The TIA, I'm glad that's going through, or that you're planning for that. A question about seniors housing and how that would be addressed, at what level of seniors housing. I think one of the things for me is the pathways. I don't see it in here, but I'm sure that you will be addressing it, and possibly I'll throw it out there to you about a pathway for golf carts, you know, whether between Westgate and the Martins lands, and, you know, how people can access, you know, on private land, I guess, put it that way. You know, something that could be addressed in your, in this application. And the only other one is the R1B. I'm not too sure if that's in the best interest yet, but you'll cross that bridge with the developer and see where that goes. So, I mean, what I would do is I would propose to give it first reading. It gives it life, but it does not bind council at this point. First reading, right?
To be clear, our recommendation is first reading with a number of very significant amendments, even now, because there are a number of the reality is that you know, we're trying to accommodate a relatively speedy development process, but there are a number of issues that we think need to be resolved prior to me feeling comfortable bringing it forward for a public hearing and speaking with the public. I do expect that there will be some members of the public that support this plan. There's certainly an exciting development. There's a lot of pent-up demand for lots in this area, but there will also be other adjacent landowners that have very valid concerns. So I want to make sure that we have a complete document, a transparent document, a finalized document prior to bringing it forward to second and third reading. And those amendment proposals that we have in there, I think, go a long way to accomplishing that. It's also why we're looking for direction on the issue of the buffer strip and the issue of the zoning, because I think it warrants some consideration prior to having the large-scale public hearing even now, because if there's no level of comfort from council to see an R1B zoning, for example, then we might as well address it now, simply because the nature of the development process is that as people that work in this field constantly, we understand what the area structure plan is and how it process is and how it works. But when we send these notifications to adjacent landowners and people that rarely spend time in this field, there are going to be people that read this and think that what the town is proposing is the R1B zoning, and that's not what is occurring. So if we see now to say no, there is very little support for that, we might as well get the developer to change it prior to having a public hearing and creating some confusion and potentially some panic, if that's potentially what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Pickering, you had your mic on briefly there. Did you have a question?
Yeah. I'd like to, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'd like to know, Cam, when he goes to 40-foot lots, what is the side set on them for building? Is it 5 feet either side? So then they'd be building houses 30 feet wide, because he doesn't show any of the bigger lots in here. It's all.
Yeah. I mean, the verbal statement that we've received is to suggest that there would be a mix based on market demand. You can put a 60-foot wide lot in an R1B zoning. The minimum is 40, whereas with R1A the minimum is 50.
And how wide? And how wide would the streets be? Like, he's not going to do something like.
Yeah, the streets will be the typical design, right?
Standard.
So yeah. So the 23rd Ave is a wider collector standard, and the rest is the local standard. He is proposing two rear lanes, so the interior blocks are having the rear lanes. So you have the opportunity potentially for some rear garages there, and that would limit the amount of driveways to the front, for example. So there's probably less concern about the R1B zoning on the interior lots than there is on the outside lots, I would suggest. But either way, it's certainly a higher density than what other neighborhoods in the area So the lots in Westgate largely are the minimum R1A size. They're largely about 50 foot.
Councillor Reese, you had your mic on. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to mention that I kind of like the idea of a buffer zone, but I understand also what you're saying about the field and be developed at some point. But I just wonder if there's not like some sort of happy medium that we come up with in terms of a buffer zone. Maybe not a full out buffer zone, but maybe something to give those residents a peace of mind. Or
Thank you. Yeah, and when I say that, like, I view my role as to provide a certain sort of cold technical opinion, recognizing that I'm not suggesting that the correct answer is no buffer zone. To say that, from my perspective, I would definitely recommend a buffer zone if it was a sort of a incompatible uses, and I don't see this as incompatible. I understand the appeal of them. The developer's position is not, in my opinion, unreasonable, which is to say that a buffer zone connecting 23rd Avenue down to the golf course is going to encourage traffic, pedestrian traffic potentially from 23rd Ave down to a portion of the golf course that does not call for people to access the golf course there. There is no pathway running along the southern portion of Westgate. There is no connection east-west. It is a dead end. So to put a pathway to connect there encourages people to walk somewhere that takes them nowhere, and it is problematic from that perspective. So from that perspective, I see that. There would potentially be opportunities to explore, say, minimum planting requirements in backyards, or other sort of controls that might provide some degree of buffering, even though it wouldn't be a physical or sort of there wouldn't be anything in land titles to show a buffer, but you could have the opportunity to say, well, if there's 3 trees in the back of every backyard or something like that, might provide a bit of a visual buffer that would be preferable. There are any number of opportunities or ways to do that that are appropriate.
Just wanted to circle back to our CAO. Kalen, did you have a comment or a question?
But Cam covered the other concern with the buffer strip is it leads to private property, and so you have to be careful if you provide a path that dead ends and almost invites people to go on private property. And if there was a pathway network that was there or some other green space, that would make really good sense to connect the mindfulness of what exactly you put there relative to the programming that's happening south of there. The other question that I had was just through to Cam. In terms of the entire R1B zoning, would it make sense in terms of like a planning perspective, the outer blocks, that be a good candidate for R1A if the concern is that this was too small lots or too much density, and leaving R1B in more of those inner streets? Is that a good delineation in terms of toning down the density as well as a more diverse lot selection built into the ASP?
Yeah, excellent question. And really, I'd say there's different stages that we could look at here. So when I look at sort of the U outside shape, so along the western edge, southern edge, and eastern edge, that would be, if we were going to go to an R1A district, that would be the first area that I would suggest be appropriate for that, backing onto Westgate, backing onto the golf course. And then potentially we could leave the interior blocks as the R1B zoning, or we could suggest that the R1B zoning is an appropriate transitory zoning between the high density zoning and the low density zoning, so just leave that one northern, sort of the northern portion of the first side street, and have the second interior block as R1A. We might provide for some mix of it at the area structure plan stage and address it more thoroughly at a rezoning stage, but I would suggest that rezoning is coming almost immediately following the area structure plan, so we might as well address it directly at this point. But or alternatively, we could say, no, we're comfortable. Like, again, from a technical planning perspective, there's nothing wrong with the R1B zoning. It's a perfectly fine zoning. If the developer feels that there's demand for houses of that size on lots that size, it's worth potentially our consideration. But I do believe that if that is the proposal that comes forward, I fully expect residents of Westgate to be less than thrilled about it come public hearing.
yeah, technical studies are by no means finalized, but our initial outlook of this area is the higher density, and we really haven't even seen a firm phasing plan, but the higher density is going to put more pressure on offsite infrastructure. We do anticipate at some point phasing might have to be considered, particularly when it comes to our sanitary trunk on the north side of the highway, as well as potentially our highway intersections with Alberta Transportation. So with the R1B, I think the overall density is slightly higher than the MDP range. So there's that. Plus, I think it might impact the phasing and how, I guess, how large of an extent of an area you could initially phase.
Realize that I didn't have an opportunity to address a question that Councillor Chapman had asked. You'd asked about the seniors housing, so I just want to address that for clarity's sake. So from our perspective, seniors housing is largely addressed through the creation of multifamily or R2 zoning, which is the appropriate zoning to build any number. Seniors housing is a sort of a nebulous term that can mean a lot of different things. So from our perspective, creating enough R2 zoning creates an opportunity for the developer to see an opportunity to build seniors housing. We're not talking about seniors housing from the Green Acres perspective. We're talking about sort of transitory housing between, you know, I live in my 2-story house and that type of thing, where people are saying, maybe I want a single floor, maybe I want to, you know, take stairs out of the equation or a yard or what have you. So there's certainly an opportunity, and I believe there is certainly demand. We know there is certainly demand for that type of housing here, but really at this point, this suggests that it is the developer's option, whether they pursue that or whether they pursue non-age restricted multifamily development based on what they see is available in the market.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments for Cameron?
For Cam, could a person buy 2 lots and make an 80-foot lot as well and plant a house in the middle with a 20-foot setback or whatever they do?
Thank you for the question. Yes, always a possibility. I mean, you could buy 2 lots in Cottonwood and merge them together and have a very large house. So that's always a possibility. You can consolidate the 2 lots into one through a simple transaction through land titles, and it's always possible to create. It's always easier to create less lots than more. So definitely a possibility, though the cost tends to be high because the developer is going to service both lots, and so the cost of buying the lots is reflective of the fact that they're both serviced, and then it's typically cheaper to buy larger parcels before they've been individually serviced.
So I have a few questions and comments, Cam, and I'll start off with when we did the open house back in March, we were showing them a area structure plan back from 1996 or 1998. And when I was here for those open houses, and there was, I'm going to say, half a dozen people that walked through that had spoken with a developer, and he was planning on putting some higher end condos facing the golf course. And obviously he's changed his mind on that now. He's trying to put as much housing in here as he can. And I think we owe it to our residents to maybe revisit this open house. And if we were to do that, you know, if we were to pass first reading tonight with some proposed changes that might need to be added. But before we do the second and third readings, you know, and I don't want to save this for a public hearing, because there's going to be a lot of people that don't even know that we're having this discussion. And I think we owe it to them to show this to him again with what he's got planned. And I think that would help mitigate some of the backlash that I know we're going to get at the public hearing. And that's one comment that I want. Regarding the east boundary buffer, if there's residential backing onto residential, I'm sure all of those lots currently have fencing, I would assume, so that whether or not people are going to have a common fence or they're going to put their own in. That was my comment about that. And then on the east side and on the west side, they'll have front garbage and recycling and compost pickup then? because there's no laneway for that area.
That would be correct, yeah.
Okay, so then I thought that would be one way of mitigating a buffer is if there was an alley going around, so that obviously that would cut down on the lot sizes. And then just for my own information, then the R1A, that's the 50-foot lot. So the R1A or B, I should say, the closest to that we currently have in Coaldale is where?
So there are some lots shown on this map that use the R1B zoning, so it tends to be a little bit more scattered. We don't have, that I can recall, an individual neighborhood that uses it exclusively. What is it's R1B is called, what is the title of it? So starter lot is R1C.
Well, what I'm getting at is I don't want to see a Parkside happen again.
Understood.
So that's the one, that's an R1C is Parkside.
Correct.
And that's
Yeah.
a 30
Largely R1C. Yeah.
and those are 30-foot lots.
35, I believe. Yeah. That's right.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to talk about the off-site levy. So if we pass first reading tonight, is the developer locked in at the first, like the current rates, or he has to meet certain benchmarks before he can qualify for that? Otherwise, he's going to be at the new rate, correct?
Payment of levies, thank you for the question, Mayor Van Rijn. Payment of levies is generally addressed as a condition of subdivision stage.
And the timeline for that is?
A difficult question to answer, depending on how quickly the developer provides us with the information that needs to be provided and the amount of time it takes to review that information. Could be as soon as this fall or late summer to get to that stage. But I'm very reluctant to set a date in my answer.
So it's maybe Kaylin, you can answer this. And when was the off-site levy, the new rate, supposed to take effect?
On where we're at with our new offsite levy
Yes.
review bylaw?
I can address that.
Sure, I think Cam would have
Thank you. So yes, we have a call middle of this week, Wednesday, to propose. So as you know, we've been working on some of the detailed analysis from that. We're looking forward to getting the entire group, which includes council representation, back together in August to review that. We'll have a range of options that exist from there. We'll get some guidance in terms of where to go, and then there will be a public input component, particularly a developer specific input section in line with the P2 plan that was passed some time ago. So if I had to forecast the offsite levy bylaw, I would suggest probably October would probably be a guess, give or take a few weeks on either end.
Okay, thank you. Subject matter for tonight, but I just want to make sure that as part of this, be utilizing the Corny Martin's name and some of the development street names and such. Is that being discussed?
It hasn't been discussed as part of this particular stage, but it's certainly, if that's something council wants to see included, we can certainly have that added in.
Okay, because again, my understanding was that was promised to the families, so that we don't forget about that.
Yeah.
And then the storm pond, again, premature, but as far as when we do the expansion, is there a possibility of doing a wetland component, you know, like or hole in the ground and kidney?
Kidney shaped. I'm gonna let Jason take that.
I guess there would be potential to add, say, a wetland component.
Like the grasses and whatever that.
Yeah, you could even create like fringe wetlands along the perimeters. That's something we could require of them. In my opinion, kind of the wet pond is kind of the middle ground between your kind of bare bones, basic, least expensive dry pond option and wetlands. So I think the facility is probably more set up just for the wet pond expansion, which I still feel like function-wise still provides the stormwater attenuation as well as the stormwater quality improvements. So I think aesthetics would probably be the main impact or main benefit of maybe going to the wetland. But I do know there's been some discussions too about creating that MR space and some pathways and really improving the look of the general area. So, but I mean, that's certainly something we could require in addition to that, some wetland components.
Be interested in that. And then also there's going to be provisions for a playground in this green space area then too. And then my last question is, like they done in Cottonwood, sump pumps, are they just going to be, if we're going to have this kind of density, they're just going to be dumping out onto the ground? Like, not going to be piped back to this storm pond?
Design standard for sump pumps is consistent with that of the city of Lethbridge. So very likely there's going to be a minor storm system, like basically pipe storm system with catch basins for overland and minor land. And I guess overland flows that are like your smaller event stuff, so what you'd see with catch basin. So very high likely there's going to be a full storm network, and in that case the sump pumps would be connected similar to how they are in our other new developments with a pump and pressurized line to that. So I don't anticipate sump pump discharges to surface.
It'll be piped into the storm then?
Yeah, it's basically developer installs a pressurized pipe to property line, and then the homeowner would connect their sump to that line.
Thank you. Any more questions for either of our two presenters? So I'll go through the decision options that will consider consideration of first reading. Option 2, that council give first reading of to bylaw 856-P-7-22 as presented. To prepare the bylaw for consideration at a public hearing at an upcoming regular or special meeting of council. And option 3, that council provide first reading to bylaw 856-P-7-22 with amendments as described by administration in their report, and direct administration to prepare the amended bylaw for consideration at a public hearing at an upcoming regular or special meeting of council. Any closing comments on the rationale for your preferred option, or?
No. I will point out it is not standard for us to not recommend a specific date. Usually when we set a public hearing, we set a date and recognize that's a little different, but I think it's very important that we provide for the opportunity to make sure that this is done correctly before we move to the next step, and that there's advertising requirements, there's review requirements. We're simply not prepared to set a date at this point. We're not legislatively required to set a date when we make the recommendation for a public hearing. So as long as we have the ability to do that, we can set that date and make the advertising.
Thank you. And then regarding the other couple of items you wanted to discuss, the buffer and the size of the lots. So what kind of a recommendation do you want us to do that? Do you want us to add it to this motion that we're going to do regarding our available options, or do a separate motion for either of those, or how do you want to do that?
Thank you. I think a separate motion, just providing us with direction. I think probably most importantly with respect to the zoning question, because that I think is probably going to be the most serious issue at the public hearing in its existing form. But I think separate motions for those two items would be appropriate.
The motion for the buffer would be a case of yes or no to a buffer?
Would be, so if, for example, council feels that there's enough warranting consideration of a buffer strip to have the developer prepare a plan amendment that includes that buffer strip, then we can direct them to do so. So keeping in mind that if a buffer strip is added, there's a reasonable cost that's going to be borne by the developer to create that plan, because now all of a sudden you've got to provide for that amount of space, and so the roads have to move and the pipes have to move. So it's not as simple as, say, drawing a green line on a map. It is a difficult thing. But if council looks at this and says, no, we understand the rationale for saying that the municipal reserve buffer strip, given that it's a dead end, is not appropriate, then perhaps it's not worth requiring the developer to do that. If we are asking the developer to put the buffer strip in for consideration at second reading, that doesn't mean that it has to be included in the ultimate decision. It's simply a question of whether or not it's an appropriate thing for the developer to do at this phase. And the same would be true of the zoning question.
We can make a motion one way or the other, but that can be changed at second or third reading.
Bound at second and third reading by any direction that you're providing us.
Okay, thank you. So I'll read back the recommended option number 3, that council provide first reading of bylaw 856-P-7-22 with amendments as described by administration in their report, and direct administration to prepare excuse me, to prepare the amended bylaw for the consideration at a public hearing at an upcoming regular or special council meeting. So when you say amendments as described by administration in a report, that's regarding the buffer and the zoning then?
Changes to the traffic impact area and stormwater management and the other technical areas.
Perfect, I just wanted to clarify that. So can I get a member of council to sponsor one of the 3 options, please? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'd like to make a motion that council provide first reading of bylaw 856-P-7-22 with amendments, and direct administration to prepare the amended bylaw for consideration at a public hearing at an upcoming regular or special meeting.
Thank you. There is a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And I'm going to ask our CAO to come and put some thought into the how we could wordsmith the lot size, the zoning. That's good. So as far as having another open house, what's your thought process on that to help mitigate?
So you're thinking another open house prior to a public hearing? For
Yes.
example. It's not an unreasonable request by any means. I think especially given the fact that, the open house, typically, if you look at South Coaldale ASP or things like that, that public input is usually developer-led, and there's a significant cost to the developer. The public input that was done here was spearheaded by the town, given the fact that the town had previously been the owner of the lots, and the fact that it's an ASP amendment, a little different. That's something we took on. So to say that it's appropriate now to do a second round, especially given some of the changes and some of there wasn't necessarily a tremendous amount of detail that was presented at the first open house. It was very general in concept, and so now that we have a little more detail, doing it again and providing a little more meat on the bone, so to speak, for concerned residents or interested parties to sink their teeth into, I think it's a reasonable request for sure.
Like the slide that we have right now, someone looking at the agenda package on our council schedule,
Yeah.
they've never seen this before, right?
Correct, yeah.
So I think we're looking for a train wreck if we don't do something as far as getting this information out to the public.
So
And I think it's fair to say that we can talk to the developer, but I think that's something we as a town need to do to be transparent, number one, and communicating with our residents. So
I agree wholeheartedly. I would suggest that we would want to do any type of open house. We would want to get the amendments and things that we're asking for done first. Make sure that we've got a document that we're comfortable with, and then to have an open house, and then post open house. The plan would then be to incorporate the feedback from the open house into another amendment to the document, and then that could come back for a public hearing.
yeah, and we can also do this on our town website as well then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Kaylin, how are we coming up?
I draft one of my homework assignment here. that council direct administration to work with the developer and their consultants to prepare a buffer concept with Westgate, as well as different density options on the perimeter blocks within the current land use plan.
That's impressive. Can I
B
get
plus.
someone to sponsor that motion, please?
Sorry, so then for
Oh.
clarity, the land use, the density changes is only with respect to the areas on the perimeter, but not to the, with that proposal is only to.
We'll have another one for the,
Okay.
yes.
This is referring to, as I understand, there was discussion about condominium-type properties backing onto the golf course that was discussed at an open house. So this would be to circle back on that to close the loop, so that there's consistent messaging about which rocks were turned over if dialogue. So council can do different density options for the entire area that's R1B. In the draft here, the most important part was the part that's adjacent to Westgate, because if you're going to look at a buffer strip, that might have some implications on that, as well as the golf course strip, as well as the far westerly strip along 30th Street. Council's free to expand that to the entire area, but that was just what I came up with as a resolution framework.
No, that covers it off. You're happy with that, Cameron? Okay, can I get someone to sponsor that? Councillor Avery.
So just for clarity, so you're putting both recommendations into one motion?
No.
Because you're talking about zoning and we're talking about a buffer. Because I don't agree with asking for a buffer, but I would like to see it all as R1. But your motion reads as both, we're zoning and buffer, correct?
So lot sizes, a minimum of the lot sizes, are we going to go R1A or R1B?
Councillor Avery is correct. I bundled two thoughts into one. You can separate it out such that council direct administration to work with the developer and their consultants to prepare a buffer concept, period. And then the secondary resolution that council direct administration to work with the developer and their consultants to prepare different density options. Finish that sentence. Density options for the entire R1B area.
So where, I can't remember who brought that up. So in the center part, if we were to do R1B in that area, on those three strips, and then R1A around the perimeter, or all of R1A? Pardon me?
Better idea.
Okay, so just to go over that one more time, and Kalen can massage his motion that we're going to discuss. So we're going to have one, or R1A around the perimeter, and then on the interior three pieces, R1Bs.
That would be one of the options, but I was trying to leave enough room for them to propose a condo type concept backing onto
Okay,
the golf course.
okay.
If you go R1A, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yes,
then that would
that's all
preclude
housing.
you from looking at a condo as an option for that strip. So that's why I put density options, including and that would include, of course, the R1A for that stretch.
Okay,
Or-
so the,
I just wanted to double check that Pam didn't have anything to say before I do so.
So with respect, so the idea of, say, seniors housing, for example, or maybe a sort of a multi-floor condo, higher end, for example, it would, if it's next to the golf course, it will be higher end because that's what golf course is. I think the discussion there was also to make sure, if I recall hearing from the public input, that would also want to be on the western portion. So it'd be in the sort of bottom left corner.
yes. So, Kalen, can you just repeat back that option there?
We're clear on the buffer concept is thought number one, that council directed admin to work with the developer and their consultants to prepare a buffer concept.
Want to sponsor that motion, please? Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Saylor, Councillor Avery, Deputy Mayor Pickering, and the mayor are opposed, so that motion is defeated. And then the second motion,
I'm 0 for 1 here. It's dangerous. That council direct administration to work with the developer and their consultants to prepare different density options for the perimeter lots within the current concept/land use plan. Just want to check with our planners, see how that.
they were sidetracked. Can you just repeat that for him one more time?
Okay, this is just the planning vetting process for this resolution. That council direct administration to work with the developer and their consultants to prepare different density options for the perimeter lots within the current concept/land use plan.
Would provide us with the opportunity to pursue higher density zoning in the like new type zoning in the southwest corner, and it would also provide us with direction to present.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Councillor Avery. Any further discussion? And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I promise the next one will be less complicated than that.
Okay, so that concludes the open portion of the meeting. So I will require a motion that council move to go into closed session at 8:10 p.m. in accordance with Section 197-2 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for items 13.1, 13.2, subject to FOIP Section 16, business interests of a third party, and Section 17, personal privacy. Can I get someone to make that motion, please? Councillor Reese, any discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and we'll take a 10-minute break, please.